What's going on, brother? How are you?
Not too much, man. Glad to be here. Labor Day. I'm sure a lot of people out there enjoying the afternoon. Rocking the Shelby golf course hat. If you're out there, get out there and play a little bit of golf. That's what I would be doing if I wasn't here. Go and support your Muni here on a Labor Day.
Yeah, have a beer for us on the golf course, or a couple. We will be here covering a lot. There's so much to talk about. This is going to be a fun show coming up. We've got Rhett Bryan joining us at 2:15 to get you ready for Titans and Cardinals this Sunday. We have got at 3:15 Brian Rice from Sports Radio WNML to recap Tennessee's Week 1, where they avoided disaster. Didn't look great, but always good to avoid disaster. We cannot say the same for a school right down the road that we're going to talk about as well. 4:15, Dr. Kevin Dyson. Talking about the chemistry, the concerns, or lack thereof, at the receiver position for the Titans. And then at 5:30, Ben Wright of Broadway Sports Media. Big night last night at Nissan Stadium. Davey and I were both there as the city of Nashville auditioned to get a World Cup hosting site coming up in a matter of years. Lots to get into. College football was fun over the weekend. The first time I ever get to yell, like, that's a hold at a TV, or like ball as a ball comes out. I've never felt more alive than the first time I yelled ball at a television. And I got the chance to do that over the weekend.
Yeah, it's like when you're a kid right after Thanksgiving and you hear the first Christmas song.
Yes.
You know? And I very clearly point out after Thanksgiving. That is the key, because that's when Christmas music starts. Oh, no, you're exactly right. That is exactly what getting to yell at a referee is like. And plenty of that this weekend. I think some great games across the board. Probably my biggest takeaway, a lot of good football teams lost games this weekend.
Yeah. I think my biggest thing was there were a lot of good quarterbacks that we thought were good quarterbacks who kind of sucked. Sam Howell was awful for North Carolina on Friday night. I was reading those reactionary tweets while I was calling the Battle of Drake's Creek on 104.5 The Zone on Friday night between Hendersonville and Beach. DJ Uiagalelei for Clemson, not great. Didn't really have time to get rid of the ball, so not totally his fault, because Georgia's defensive line is going to crush a lot of good offensive lines this year. And Clemson doesn't have a good offensive line. JT Daniels, I thought was meh, not great for Georgia. And I thought that Spencer Rattler was bad for Oklahoma, which you and I were talking about this before the show started. Like, that's just kind of like we assume that just because Oklahoma has a guy that plays quarterback, they're just going to be a Heisman finalist. Not necessarily the case with that.
And look, the truth is a lot of those guys will level out. They'll be fine, but rough starts for guys who I think a lot of people expected to have borderline Heisman campaigns.
You can join the show today on 104.5 The Zone TV, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitter, the artist formerly known as Periscope. We've got 4 hours for you. We are live. We are doing it live. And there's also good football coming up tonight between Ole Miss and Louisville that we're going to look forward to. But, Davey, it is finally a Tennessee Titans game week.
Absolutely.
We are going to see Titans starters for the first time since Baltimore. It just feels good to be able to talk about real football and not preseason football, and analyzing how the Titans' third and fourth string cornerbacks are going to look against Justin Fields. And I'm excited to talk with Rhett Bryan coming up here in a couple minutes, but we're going to get into the entire NFL. We're going to go around the league, probably in that final hour, talk about our most anticipated games around the league, because Week 1 has some very, very good football games in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, starting Thursday night, right off the jump, Cowboys-Bucs will be a good football game, and there are some great ones, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock time slot, 4 o'clock time slot, all of those. So it's it's going to be a great weekend of football, and just so glad that it's all done, the waiting. Once college football rolls around, you've got the first full week, not week 0, the first full week. It's you're safe, and then you'll have something to watch the whole weekend moving forward.
So you and I were both at Nissan Stadium as well last night. And if you are new to me and Davey, of course, you probably know us as just those are the guys that talk soccer on 104.5 The Zone. And if you say that begrudgingly, then you probably haven't tuned in. We're not going to spend the entire show today on soccer like we do on Tuesday nights. Shameless plug, 9 p.m. On 104.5 The Zone. But from a city of Nashville perspective, when the city of Nashville throws big events, we're going to talk about it on the station. And last night was one of the bigger events that Nashville has had. It was certainly the biggest soccer game that Nashville's ever had.
in
Numbers-wise in the stadium, no.
In stature, yes, it was the biggest game they've ever had. The Manchester City Tottenham game did outdraw it by 15,000 or so. I think that was in the mid 50s. 43,000 people there, almost 44,000 people there last night. Good environment. I think you mentioned it. I don't know that I sat down for gameplay the whole time.
No, I didn't sit once.
Yeah, so I think that kind of environment is good. Now, look, I'll say this. I've been to 4 or 5 U.S. men's national team games, probably less than you, less than a lot of people, like guys like Jonathan Slape and Sloop. Those guys travel around to see them, which good on them for doing it. Right. But this was the first game I've been at where there was like a host, like the guy on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
And it was weird. Like they're trying to, the game is happening. And the guy is on the TV screen trying to get you to like do some kooky little game or whatever.
It was really bad.
It was weird, man. Just weird. And I assume that's a U.S. men's national team call. It's not like Nissan hires that guy. Like they said, hey, let's get a DJ, let's get a host. It was a little bit weird for me. That being said, I think good environment would have been better, clearly, with a better performance. We'll get into that at some point, I'm sure.
43,000 people in Nissan Stadium last night, and I think it's important to have the context of what other crowds look like. What are other cities doing or not doing when an event like that comes to town? We're going to provide that context later on in the show. Ben Wright, in our final hour, will join us to talk about that. Felt good to tailgate at Nissan Stadium again.
Yeah.
Felt really good. The Nashville SC Roadies put on a good show there. I know the American Outlaws are kind of the U.S. fan section. It was a good appetizer for tailgating this Sunday when the Titans host the Cardinals. It was great. And there's a lot of talk too from that last preseason game about the lines, the Nissan Stadium. It's so hard to get into the stadium. There was no trouble getting into the stadium at all last night with 43,000 people, and they didn't have, I think, every gate or every concession stand open.
The concessions were a little outrageous last night. But getting in and out was fine.
Getting in and out was fine. And then once you got in there, you were like, oh, well, okay, why didn't you staff the stuff in the stadium as much as you staffed the gates? But that was a big concern for that final Bears game because I still think that happened because there was a lightning delay.
That's possible, yeah.
I think that's a pretty big part of that discussion. This is the first time I've gotten to turn on a microphone since then.
I can say with certainty, attending those games, season opener the last 2 years, I got in line to get into the stadium, and it took more than 20 minutes, and I missed at least the first drive.
For
the Titans, yeah. So it is an ongoing problem. And that's, a different entrance than I think most people use. I use the one in the middle of the field on the river side. I think it's probably the least used entrance. But yeah, so it's there are issues there. It looked like from that Bears game to this game, they have alleviated some of the issues. So credit to Nissan Stadium for that.
Other headlines around the weekend in college football. Alabama. Good Lord. I think Alabama's 2 possessions better than everyone else in the SEC right now.
At least.
Why are we surprised about this either?
Well, and look, we'll get into this, I'm sure. But I think you're seeing a lot of people play down the Georgia win, which I think is really stupid.
Yeah,
the Clemson team is good, and the Georgia defense is incredible. And these are, this is a team who everybody's made fun of for decades for just can't get the job done. They got the job done the other night. But as good as that defense is, they're just nowhere close to Bama on both sides of the ball. It's crazy, man. I mean, it's a really, really, really good football team, and at some point, it's just like it's how long can Nick Saban do this, right? Just with different people and different coordinators, different quarterbacks, different X, Y, Z. It's unbelievable.
I think the thing that I take away from this weekend, looking at Alabama and the way they've retooled, the way they have Bill O'Brien as their offensive coordinator, and they just haven't missed a beat at all. It's incredible the consistency of what Alabama is with so many different faces creating the same outcome. Look at what Ed Orgeron and LSU did in the Rose Bowl. They lose to a good UCLA team. No disrespect to UCLA. They've had 2 great games to open the season. But it shows you that a CEO-style coach like Nick Saban, like Ed Orgeron, You're looking at Ed Orgeron, who caught lightning in a bottle in 2019 at quarterback, at offensive coordinator, at defensive coordinator, at offensive line, at pretty much every position. Talent has never been an issue at LSU. It's never going to be an issue at LSU. They've put a crazy amount of people in the NFL with different coaches, different coaching styles, different quarterbacks. Ed Orgeron could only win the way he did it in 2019 with those people. And when his coordinator leaves and goes to the NFL, it's like, oh, crap, what do we do now? And you know who doesn't ever have that problem? Nick Saban.
Ever.
You never hear about him like, oh, Nick Saban's really struggling with new coaches on both sides of the football. He has to replace everyone every year. You can't tell. It's incredible to me, like the consistency of what they are and how everyone else struggles with this. But Alabama is the only team that doesn't struggle with replacing coaches and replacing quarterbacks.
And I know people get sick of seeing the same team win. Everyone gets tired of all of that stuff. I'm understanding of it. But you've got to respect it, man. You've got to respect it. As annoying as it is to watch year in, year out, you just got to give them the due.
You really do. I hate it. It's a machine, but it's a little crazy. No doubt about it. I love to talking about Georgia. Our buddy Braden Gall tweeted this and said, what would be more Georgia? Losing week 1 to the elite team as a big disappointment, or beating the elite team week 1 and then losing to Tennessee?
Or Kentucky.
Or losing to
whoever
Kentucky,
it might be, right?
Missouri.
Which Kentucky looks pretty good, man.
I'm a little surprised by that because that's my upset pick for Tennessee this year.
Okay.
That's the Tennessee game that I'm picking that I don't think a lot of other people are picking. Because the last time Kentucky beat Tennessee 2 years in a row was, I believe, the 1980s. And so until it happens, it's kind of like Tennessee going to the swamp. Like, I'm not going to pick Tennessee to win in the swamp until they do it. I'm not going to pick Kentucky to win 2 in a row against Tennessee until they do it. This might be the team to do it. Their quarterback was tremendous, even though he eats bananas with the peel on, which... Did you see the video?
I saw it. I did see
Alyssa Lang on the sideline? Alyssa Lang does a great job.
Yeah.
Eating a banana with the peel on, just in the side of it. That's one of the most disgusting things that I've seen. What's the more disgusting bit at a college football game this weekend? Guys eating mayonnaise.
The mayonnaise.
Or Alyssa Lang eating a banana with the peel on it at a Kentucky game. The mayonnaise was worse because they're shoveling a whole tub of it. Instead of just taking
As
one
a guy
bite.
who loves Duke mayonnaise, I am a
Really?
brand addict to Duke's mayonnaise. It is the only mayonnaise I will buy.
Wait.
Yeah.
How long have I known you? This is one of the most random things
I've
I've
got
ever heard
serious
you say.
brand dedication towards Duke mayonnaise. And I've been there long before they cut college football sponsorships, my friend. Don't eat Kraft. I'll eat Hellman's in a pinch. I'm a Duke's mayonnaise guy.
615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in today. That's the weirdest thing you could have possibly said.
I'm a weird guy, man. Let's get it out of the way, right?
Coming up, we'll talk to Rhett Bryan. I want to ask Rhett, what's the weirdest brand loyalty that Rhett Bryan has? We'll ask him that. We're going to get into Titans game week. There are lots of question marks. This is what we kind of want to react with you guys on today. What's your biggest question mark heading into week 1? For the Tennessee Titans against the Arizona Cardinals? There's so many new faces. There's so much different from last season. But at the same time, the identity of this team wants to be what it was 2 years ago when they made an AFC championship run. We'll get into that with Rhett Bryan. We'll hit the headlines with him as we get you ready for Titans and Cardinals this week. There's lots to discuss today, and we've got 4 hours to do it. We'll talk with Rhett B. coming up on 104.5 The Zone.
Jason Martin and Ramon Foster might have the mics, but the show is about you, the fam.
You guys are the show. We have some microphones. That means you can hear us.
no holiday in football.
Exactly. I said that as I'm walking in.
For those who are out today, hey, listen, hope you're listening. Thanks for listening, but it's game week.
That's right. What excites you the most about putting everything together, putting together the elements of a Titans radio broadcast? Like, what's the part of that you enjoy the most heading into week one of a new season?
I think it's just, putting together a pregame show and, scripting some things and, just interesting things and the storylines going into all this. But it really starts when we turn it over to Mike Keith and Dave McGinnis and it's kickoff time. And to know that fans will be in stands for the first time in 2 years in terms of loaded capacity. And, look, this team has a lot of new faces.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts. And the Arizona Cardinals are not going to be easy. This is a team that is trying to keep pace with everybody else in the NFC West. And, they've gone and gotten some acquisitions in free agency that's, over 30 in some significant spots. They've done some drafting. They have Kyler Murray quarterback. So, it's look, it's just game week. I mean, I'm ready to go. We have the Mike Vrabel show tonight at 6 o'clock right here on the Zone. In fact, if you want to send a coach a question via Twitter, you can do that at Titans Radio, and he will answer those questions at 6 o'clock tonight as he joins Mike Keith.
Love it. Great way to get ready for game number one this Sunday. And we've got a lot to get to with Rhett here, talking about the question marks, the knowns that we do know, and how this team will look a little bit different from last year. But first, we got to start with what we were talking about going into the break. Davey says that he is just brand loyal to a fault with Duke's Mayo, which I'm still just unable to comprehend.
Before Duke's Mayo was a thing, he said, too. Before it was a national college football branded product. And I appreciate Davey's loyalty because I have the same kind of thing. It's Heinz ketchup or it's the road.
Okay.
There are plenty of ketchup products out there, but it is Heinz or see you later.
Interesting.
That's a good one. Fancy Hunts, they don't do it for me.
No, sir. Yeah. You can have all the fancy you want. No. I'm out. Heinz. End of story.
I don't know what mine would be. We're gonna have to circle back to this at the end of the segment because I have no idea what I'm really brand loyal to. Our engineer Kirby Allen Kirby will not drink anything but Pepsi.
Diet Pepsi, right?
That's one of the weirder ones to me, where he has a cooler and he'll freeze it, and then by the end of the day he's had 3 and they've just melted. He just takes it like it's. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. All right, Rhett, let's get into Titans and Cardinals. And we were talking about this team's defensive line because when you talk about the different position groups that look different this season, Denico Autry, Jeffrey Simmons, and Tier Tart is the most fascinating group on this team. What's a realistic expectation for what that group can be, and specifically what Jeffrey Simmons can be? Because Jeffrey Simmons, with help that he didn't have as much of last year compared to his rookie season with Jarrell Casey, becomes a fascinating piece of this defense.
Well, it starts with Denico Autry because that was a huge free agent target for John Robinson. He stole him away from a division rival. And all you have to do is go back and look at the film of what Denico Autry has done to Titans offenses in his time as a Colt. I mean, guys had, I think, 18 quarterback sacks in the last 3 years. So that opposite Jeffrey Simmons already makes Jeffrey Simmons even better. And Jeffrey Simmons doesn't need that much help, but he needs help because he's going to be double-teamed. Well, how much is he going to be double-teamed now? And then we've often talked about Tier Tart, second-year man from FIU, who went immediately after the playoff loss to Baltimore and talked to Frank Perrino, the strength and conditioning coach, talked to Mike Vrabel and said, show me the way. I know I'm not in the best shape I need to be. I know I'm not, and let's face it, the training table and the training room at FIU is vastly different from an NFL, weight room. And they got him in there, and the dude's been working like an animal. Dropped 4% body fat for a big dude. It's a lot of stuff. And he's still raw. He's still got things they're working on. So, you hear that. Terrell Williams, the defensive line coach, will tell you he's still got a lot of stuff to work on. But you like the way he's headed. And if you're using a measuring stick on success for this, Jeffrey Simmons in year 3, he needs to have 7 to 8 quarterback sacks. That's where you can show marked improvement. And it's because Danico Autry's on the other side and Tierre Tart's lined up as the nose tackle, but that you have, Rashad Weaver and you have Bud Dupree to go opposite Harold Landry. You've got to have that. And then that you hope that your secondary is sewn up and fixed up from what it was a year ago in, getting, great coverage so that those coverage sacks come. Mm-hmm. So that, it's kind of, it's a front to back and back to front process in terms of reciprocation.
You mentioned kind of the retooling, and it's been pretty full scale on the defensive side of the ball. Moving back towards the secondary, pretty much wholesale changes other than Kevin Byard. You've got Fulton on one side, Jackrabbit on the other. Molden's going to move into the slot. That's what it looks like for the time being. You just mentioned coverage sacks. Hey, you can have the best secondary in the world. If you're not getting the ball, they're going to get overthrown. They're going to throw receivers open. Do we see Kevin Byard kind of get back to that level we've seen him previously this year now that is retooled in the secondary?
I think that certainly is the hope, and that's what that's why it's been retooled for sure. You feel like Kevin Byard was kind of the fireman putting out fires last year. I mean, they gave up an exorbitant amount, 51% on third down, and they know don't want to be anywhere near that number again. And you mentioned Fulton, you mentioned Jackrabbit, you mentioned the draft pick in Elijah Molden. Plus, you have Caleb Farley, who is the prototypical long corner that the Titans, quite frankly, have never had a specimen like he is. And he's got a chance to work himself into that rotation. But it also goes to third-year man Imani Hooker, who has done everything he needs to do to take that next step forward in this thing. And provided that these other names, that we've mentioned are doing what they need to do, I think Kevin Byard can certainly get back to where he needs to be. And, the best Kevin Byard ain't too dang shabby. They need that for sure. But, they got, outside of Jackrabbit Jenkins, they've got a young secondary.
Yeah, it's a really interesting piece of the conversation because I feel like the theme of this offseason for the defensive side has been John Robinson is betting on younger defensive backs being better with better help up front. With in the interior, with Rashad Weaver, with Bud Dupree. They're investing in the front seven, which is then also an investment in the back 4 or 5 because you're betting on the fact that, look, Bud Dupree makes Imani Hooker a better safety. Rashad Weaver helps make all these other guys better at the back end. And I think it's a smart way when you look at the dollars and you look at the financials of how to improve a lot of positions with less money in a season that we're never going to, an offseason we're never really going to see again.
Right.
Monetarily. It's a smart way to improve a couple of different spots by investing in really one.
And your theory's right. I think he is going with a youth movement in places, and he's added veteran, in other spots and certainly on the other side of the ball. But, yeah, I think that's exactly right. But, the key to all of this, the guy who's back who makes this defense better around him, Jayon Brown. Jayon Brown goes out with the dislocated elbow last year and is put on IR, and it was just not the same thing. And Rashaan Evans, no slight towards him. He's a great player. But when you put in that green dot on your helmet to communicate for the first time instead of having it from day one, that's a different dynamic for you. And so having Jayon Brown back is huge in all this. And I'll point to another player who's going to be important in this, and that's David Long.
Yeah.
David Long, like a Tierre Tart, going into year 3 instead of year 2 for Tart, he has really improved his coverage skills. If you look at him and the way he is now, he knows where he wants to be, knows what he's supposed to be doing, so he can play fast and aggressive. He, as Coach Mack says, he's see-ball, get-ball guy coming out of West Virginia. He's Defensive Player of the Year in his conference. But him being able to drop back in space, and now he's not Jayon Brown. Don't get me wrong. Jayon Brown is a different animal. That you can see the difference in short game ground that he can make up very quickly and what he can do in coverage spots. But David Long has gotten much better at that. So, they've got a good reserve there behind Jayon Brown, who, David Long will come in and play some spots. But Jayon Brown is the thing in all this. He is what makes this thing completely. He's the synergy of it all in the middle tier of that defense, making everyone else better.
I think Rashaan Evans is an interesting one because he's playing for a contract somewhere,
Yep.
whether it's here next year or somewhere else. And like Coach Mack always says, hey, every day in this league is an interview, right?
That's right.
And so that's where he is full stop this season. So I think, like you so often see, you get the best out of those guys when the contract is on the line. And I'm really interested to see him this year, especially with all the pieces we just mentioned around him.
100%, Davey. And let me say this. Every day that I was able to get out there and see those dudes come out of the building and go to the practice field. I didn't see that every day just because of when they let us in to see practice. But every time I did, Rashaan Evans was the first dude out in that practice field. He's working a jugs machine for his interception skills. He's working on lower body, upper body. He's working on everything. He's the first dude. In fact, Tierre Tart was usually player 2 or 3 that came out every single day. The urgency's there. And you're right. It's contract year. But he knows that if he wants to continue to wear this uniform, he can play himself into some good money because we know the salary cap is going up dramatically next year. And you're right. To your point, Will, this is a one-and-done thing where you were up against it and you had to move some parts and move some things out of the way because you were up against it with the cap, the way it retracted. And he's got a chance to play himself into some money. Now, also keeping in mind that so can Harold Landry. You're going to have to pay A.J. Brown. You're going to have to pay Jeffrey Simmons down the road. But, yeah, he is a huge part in this, and I think you'll get the best out of him. I think you're right.
Let's flip over to the other side of the ball. Just looking at it on its face, the biggest question mark on the whole team right now seems to be right tackle. Who's going to start there? Going into Sunday, that seems to be the biggest question. My kind of 1B on offense is, what's Anthony Ferkser going to be able to do picking up the reins fully from Jonnu Smith walking away?
All right,
we know how good he is in the pass game.
Sure.
Is he going to be able to block at the level the Titans need him to be able to?
All right, let's hit your first question first with the offensive line. First of all, we need to hear more good news that Nate Davis and Ben Jones, the starting center and right guard, are off of the COVID-19 reserve list, which as of right now they are not. But I think Nate Davis is in day 9. I think Ben Jones is in day 8, so they're right there. They're very close, which lines up that if you get them Wednesday, that's when the real full tilt boogie starts anyway for a game week. As for right tackle, Coach Mike Vrabel has been coy about that. He has not answered a lot of questions about that. And, of course, they took Dylan Radins in the second round in the draft this year. I really think it's down to 3 guys, and it depends on who they trot out there with whatever they believe. That's Tyson Braylow, who filled in admirably at left tackle after Taylor Lewan went down with the ACL last year. Kendall Lamb, who they brought over in a 1-year deal that was a former Cleveland Brown. And maybe David Quessenberry, who has been serviceable in spots. It's probably down to those 3 if I had to guess. And, I was talking to Ramon Foster about this the other day, and he would know. He played 11 years, He thinks Dylan Radins is maybe a guard, and maybe he is. Maybe that's right. And when you're thinking about youth at a guard position, Roger Saffold's not getting any younger, so maybe there's something. If he can swing and do both, then hey, and listen, in camp they've lined him up in several different spots. But I think that's a huge question. And then Anthony Ferkser, I had my doubts as to whether he's TE1, but I look at what he did in camp, and I look at. That's a guy that's put on some bulk, and the right kind, not going to McDonald's bulk.
For sure.
And I think he's put on the right amount of bulk to block and things. Now, they still have Jeff Swaim, who just came off of the COVID-19 reserve list today. So they've got that option. But I think Ferkser can admirably, serviceably do things. And it just depends on what, do they ask him to block a lot? I don't know. But I know that he's making the right moves in the receiving game. I saw some catches he made in practice that's like, that's a Jonnu Smith catch. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, I see what they see now. But I think you're right. Right tackle and tight end depth are kind of where we are if we're looking for chinks in the armor kind of thing.
Well, and Rhett, too, I think when you look at week 1 and when you look at the Arizona Cardinals, 4th in the NFL last year with 48 sacks. They add J.J. Watt, who I think still has a little bit left in the tank with more help around him. We were talking about this earlier. Second most snaps for a defensive player in the NFL last year.
At 32 years old, he had 1,013 snaps behind one Harold Landry.
Yeah.
So the
me,
durability question's there because he's
Right.
missed so many. It was like 30 some odd games out of the last 60 games he's missed due to various injuries. He put together a solid year last year. I mean, if you play 1,000 snaps at 31 years old, that's nothing to sneeze at.
I think you're going to learn a lot about the two question marks we've mentioned in the secondary and on the offensive line week 1, which concerns me for this Titans team going into week 1 just based on the matchups. I think the Titans are a better overall team than the Arizona Cardinals, but you're going to need groups to progress throughout the season and get better that are question marks right now that are going to need to pretty much be ready to play at a high level week 1. When you talk about DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, kind of a similar vibe to what we've got in J.J. Watt on the offensive side of the ball.
Yep.
You had Christian Kirk, you had Rondale Moore.
That's right.
Into that Arizona Cardinals offense. You're going to learn a lot about this Titans secondary, and you're going to learn a lot about this Titans offensive line Sunday. Much less, down the road where you need those guys to kind of progress and get better as the season goes along.
Yeah, because you look at what the offensive line's going to face. I mean, you've got J.J. Watt, you've got Chandler Jones, Isaiah Simmons, high draft pick there from Clemson, who's, kind of a tweener, can do it all kind of guy. And I think the one thing that you can take advantage of is the secondary in this. Budda Baker's clearly their best DB at safety back there. But they no more Patrick Peterson, Malcolm Butler, whatever happened with him, and he's out of the way now. And Marco Wilson, the rookie from Florida, is going to get a lot of playing time in this. That's a place where you feel like A.J. Brown and Julio Jones can take advantage. But you've got to be able to keep the Wolves away from the door to get the ball to them for sure. But yeah, their defense bothers me more than their offense does in this thing. And you hit the nail on the head. Well, they have 48 sacks last year.
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty good.
That's nothing. Yeah, that's a significant number. But yeah, there's plenty. And then, what the Titans defense does against Kyler Murray, who can make off-schedule plays with his body and has done it time and again. So, there's plenty of interesting storylines and one-on-one battles in this thing going into week 1.
All right, before we go to break, I have my brand, my weird brand I'm loyal to.
Okay.
So actually, I've got to give a shout-out. My mother is listening right now and texted me this. So she knows me better than I know myself, which is no surprise to anybody.
Mom usually knows best.
Kroger popcorn.
Ooh,
Kroger brand popcorn.
Love it.
I'm not
Now,
kidding.
like
Great selection.
microwave, you pop?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Kroger brand butter
Movie
popcorn.
butter, movie house butter?
Either one, either
Okay.
movie or regular
You're not
butter.
looking for Orville Redenbacher. You're
I
buying
am
Kroger brand.
Kroger brand is better. I don't know why.
And you know the difference.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you could blindfold me and I'd be able to tell you the difference.
Okay.
That's something actually I don't know if a lot of people know about me. I love microwave popcorn. Like when I was a kid, I would eat like a bag of popcorn. Like that was my first thing when I got home from school. I would make a bag of Kroger brand popcorn every single time. And then sometimes I'd like watch a show at night. I'd make another one. Like I would have probably 5 or 6 bags of microwave popcorn a week when I was in middle school and high school.
And loyal to Kroger, the official tailgate headquarters of your Tennessee Titans.
That's right. Rhett Bryan, you can hear, of course, the Mike Vrabel Show tonight, 6 o'clock, right after Davey and I are finished.
Yep.
So we will lead
Send
you
your
right into
questions
that.
to Coach at Titans Radio on Twitter, at Titans Radio. We will get those and we will ask the coach.
Rhett, I know it's a busy week for you. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy.
I love it. Couldn't be happier. Mac Talk is tomorrow night. Keith Bullock and Titans tonight's Wednesday night.
Tune in all week.
Next thing you know, the game's here on Sunday. I mean, this is the home of the Titans and the home of the Vols, and NFL Week 1 for your Tennessee Titans is here. Don't miss a minute.
I love it. Getting you ready for week number 1. Titans Radio will have the best coverage, as always, throughout the week and Sunday for week number 1. But, Davey, when we come back, I want to react to a little bit of the Titans conversation and get into our biggest concerns and question marks for this team heading into the season. We'll do that. We'll do much more with you until 6 o'clock today. Will Boling, Davey Shepard, more of the show coming back on 104.5 The Zone.
The Titans host the Arizona Cardinals to open the 2021 regular season. Coverage with Buck
I don't think a Mike Vrabel team knows how to win the way they were using a formula last season, if that makes sense. Like, is that a fair statement to make at this point?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, I don't think you could have a top 5 offense and a bottom 10 defense, and I don't think Mike Vrabel knows how to win with that kind of team as well as he does with a middle of the road offense and a top 10 defense.
Well, and I think to be fair, just kind of on the trends you see in the league, even if you've got the top 5 offense, you've at least got to be middle of the road on defense to make it where you want to go. And so it's really hard to do as much as Nashville to win a division with a defense like they had last year.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, to your point, I think you're right. And I think now, look, we said it like this before the show. John Robinson and Mike Vrabel have put a lot of eggs in the last year was a player issue on defense.
They sure have.
All of the eggs, kind of, actually.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, stands out because they've retooled. Secondary looks almost totally different outside of Kevin Byard. A lot different across the front. Linebacker is going to look very similar. But, hey, we all think this checks out on paper. But we'll see here in a few days. And so I think Rhett was spot on. I don't think you can underrate how much Jayon Brown does for this defense. David Long, I thought, was extremely serviceable last year in the moments he was kind of pressed into duty.
Yeah.
But I think you almost were getting more out of David Long than you could reasonably expect.
He's an instinctual player. Yeah. David Long is a see-ball, hit-ball linebacker.
Yeah, he flashes so well. And but it's not going to be consistent every down like you see with Jayon.
I think the question I have for this defense, looking specifically at what this team did really well last season, plus 11 turnover differential for the Tennessee Titans led the National Football League in 2020. It's the reason why this wasn't the worst defense in the NFL, because they created turnovers. They created big plays a lot. And that's, I think, a trend in college football and in professional football. The way the rules are set up now in advantage of the offense, whether it's pass interference, whether it's the no huddle, whether it's you can only sub defensively if the offense subs, things of that nature. The rules are slanted for offenses to have more success than defenses. And eventually defenses will catch up. But I don't think
that
day
same
is
story.
here.
Did you see that Tom Brady clip going around Twitter last week? Is so well done.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just saying, like, hey, the league's basically put all of the responsibility that should be on me on defensive players.
Correct.
And so I've been saying that for years.
Yeah. And college football has caught up to this now, too.
Yes, exactly. That ejection the other day was just rough.
Awful.
Man.
Awful.
They've got to change that. Me and Wes argued about that on Twitter for like an hour last year.
Did you really?
No, last year.
Last year.
Last
Okay,
year
okay,
about
okay.
an ejection. And look, I get it. You've got to protect players, especially kids, in college playing football.
Right.
But come on, man. I mean,
I know. Yeah, we got to get into that too, Lord. Because we're going to talk college football in an hour or two here with Brian Rice coming up. But I think going back to that point, though, if this Titans defense is incrementally better but sustains what it did creating turnovers, and if they lead the league, say the Titans defensively are top 5 in the league this year in turnover differential, you're talking about a top 5 defense, I think. Because when you put together what they did, creating turnovers, taking away the football, if you're just a little bit better, if you're middle of the road and everything else, and you're the best in the NFL in creating turnovers, you're talking about a top 5, top 10 defense.
Yeah.
That's what excites me about this team.
Even if it doesn't quite get there, I think there's kind of two sets of concerns coming into this game, right? On both sides of the ball, and they're very reasonable.
Right.
People are saying, hey, are you going to see regression on offense? Offensive coordinator left, first-time play caller, all very, very reasonable stuff to say. On defense, it's, hey, there's so much turnover. Was it really the player's fault? Again, I think all totally fair things to talk about. I think the truth is you're going to see a little bit of both. You're going to see a little bit of regression on offense, maybe not top 5,
sure,
but, 5 to 10.
I don't know if it needs to be top 5.
I know. That's what I'm saying. And then you're going to see improvement on defense. And so what that makes is a more consistent football team. And I don't know that they need to score 40 points a game. It's so easy to get caught up in wanting to be the Chiefs and thinking, oh, well, if you're going to beat Pat Mahomes, you're going to have to do X, Y, C. Right. What did Tampa Bay do to them last year in the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Have a good defense. So it's clearly not going to be Tampa Bay's defense, but it can be pretty good.
The way these units can complement one another if the defense gets a couple more 3-and-outs and is better on third downs, you're talking about a ball control, time of possession offense that complements that defense really well. That if the defense is just 20% better than what it was last season, you're making the offense, I think, 50 to 60% better, if that makes sense, because of what the nature of this offense is. This is not a quick strike offense that, the defense has given us more time. Let's take a shot deep downfield and try to just, get off the field once again.
Now,
this offense is going to keep the defense on the field so much more, because if the defense is a little bit better, then it makes the job a lot tougher stopping Derrick Henry with a tired defense.
I think this is going to be more of a quick strike offense than it has been in years past due to those guys that you've got at receiver now.
I don't know if it is, because I think Arthur Smith was good at scheming the shots down the field. How good is Todd Downing at creating schemes that get guys open in space 20 to 30 yards down the field? I don't know the answer to that yet.
I don't know the answer to that yet, but I think that I know the answer to how many teams have corners who can line up, lock on A.J. Brown and Julio Jones.
Right.
I think I know the answer to that, and it's not very many.
And which one of those guys is your deep threat?
Yeah.
You got to pick your poison. No doubt about that. We will continue the conversation on that front when we come back, but we will shift gears to college football. And I have a question for Vanderbilt fans and question for SEC fans in Nashville. Was Saturday rock bottom for Vanderbilt football? I don't know if it was. I just know that I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better if you're wearing black and gold on West End. We'll get into that next on 104.5 The Zone.
We have the best broadcasters in the NFL. So why wouldn't you want Mike Keith and Coach Mack on your smartphone?
He can run this thing. 40, 45.
against Vanderbilt fans. A rain delay is a rain delay. People leave, after 2 hours or whatnot. Really bad start. And then you have ETSU 2021. This is an ETSU team that won the Southern Conference in 2018. Just started playing football again in 2015. Former Tennessee OC Randy Sanders is their head coach. Former Kentucky OC as well that ended Tennessee's 26-game winning streak over Kentucky back in the day. You've got Philip Fulmer helped start this program. There's a lot more at play here than just, an FCS team beat Vanderbilt. It's a bunch of Tennessee kids that weren't good enough to go play Power 5 or Division I college football that are playing, it's a bunch of East Tennessee, like a Sullivan East High School, like a Dobbins Bennett. It's like kids that were good high school football players. They're like, oh, yeah, I want to keep playing. And they go to ETSU, and they just beat Vanderbilt. I don't know where Vanderbilt goes from here. Because I think if you're losing this game, it's going to get worse before it gets better for Clark Lee in year number 1.
Yeah, but I think that's probably always been a point, not to the players, but like internally. They knew that, right? They knew that this was going to be a hard year. Yeah. They knew that it's not a 1-year plan. I don't know that it's even a 5-year plan. But to quote another Tennessee coach's catchphrase, brick by brick, you just kind of keep doing what you're doing. And so now, do I think they had losing by 20 at Eastern Tennessee State on the bingo card? No.
They couldn't do anything. I don't know how much that game you watched. ETSU was just better in every phase of the game.
Every phase of the game.
Yes.
That Seals fumble was bad.
I had sympathy for Vanderbilt fans. I really did. Because there was excitement. There were people there in that. I think it was a pretty good crowd. I don't know what the official number was. I know there was pictures going around before the game of kind of an empty stadium, but it filled in decently well. Clark Lee's one of their guys. And this is where we had this conversation, in the break. Vanderbilt's trying to be Stanford. They're trying to be Duke. They're trying to recruit the intellectual kid from the private school who is smart, who's a good football player, and can speak the same language of Clark Lee, who is a very, very intelligent guy. I like Clark Lee a lot. The time I've spent around him, the time I've spent talking with him about his vision for Vanderbilt football on and off the air, getting to meet him in Hoover. I think Clark Lee is a great fit for Vanderbilt. The question I have for Vanderbilt is, being Duke and Stanford works in the Pac-12 and in the ACC when you're playing other teams with like-minded missions, right? Wake Forest, North Carolina. You've got a lot of intellectual, intelligent, smart kids that are going to these really good ACC institutions. You don't have that in the SEC. Vanderbilt's the only team that's trying to fill this niche. So what works at Stanford, what worked for Derek Mason also as the defensive coordinator at Stanford, doesn't work in the SEC because that kind of kid, you can't just have that kind of kid and beat Georgia, Florida, and even compete with teams in the SEC East that you don't have to play on a blue moon when Duke goes to Atlanta and plays Alabama. You got to play them every year. That's the struggle for me for where Vanderbilt is. What's unique and what's different about Vanderbilt that works in the SEC? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, and this is where I said before, I think the counterpoint is I don't know that he wants to be Duke. I think he wants to be Northwestern. And I think Northwestern's doing it, and it's, listen, take it easy out there. I'm not saying the Big Ten is on the same level as the SEC.
Right.
But it's better than the Pac-12 and it's better than the ACC.
I would agree.
And so Northwestern is consistently in the game against Ohio State or Michigan. They might not be beating those teams every year, but they're playing right there with them. They're playing with Penn State. They're playing with Michigan State. And so I think that's where you could see this team. Now, they beat Purdue and they beat Iowa State. They beat some of those, or Iowa rather, some of those other teams. So
Iowa, who looked great Saturday.
And Indiana, who looked very
awful,
very bad. That's where I think Clark Lee wants to be a Pat Fitzgerald and take this team and make it be the best that it can be in the SEC. Because just on its face, the truth is they're never going to be a dominant power in football in this league. No questions asked, just not a conversation. But can they beat Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina consistently? Can they have a shock win here and there? I think James Franklin showed that you can. Yeah. And I think a team like Northwestern shows that you can take that mold of high caliber, highly intelligent players who maybe don't have an eye on the NFL but are good enough to probably play somewhere that they could and get them to a respectable level of football. And so
Northwestern's the kind of team that every 4 years they'll get a veteran quarterback, and these things are cyclical in college football when you recruit and you don't have salary cap and payroll and scouting like you do in the NFL. It's a cyclical game, which makes Alabama again the outlier, that they go through different cycles of beginning with new quarterbacks and new skill position guys, but it's the same product. Not everyone else is like that, especially not teams like Northwestern and Vanderbilt and Stanford, who's started to struggle a little bit more under David Shaw. The thing is, like a Northwestern, they get that senior quarterback, and they'll compete 1 out of every 3 or 4 years at a much higher level because it's cyclical, right? You get Trevor Siemian as the senior quarterback at Northwestern. You get at Iowa, C.J. Beathard, when he was still there and really good. BGA guy, shout out Nashville private schools, who was really good for them. Both those teams, by the way, have in common that they got crushed by Tennessee and Butch Jones in January bowl games. But that's what Vanderbilt can be when Kyle Shermer is a senior. You beat Tennessee when they have Alvin Kamara and you compete at a higher level. When you get Ken Seals as a senior coming up in 2 years, that should be your cycle. That should be your year. Vanderbilt doesn't always have to make a bowl game. You win 7 games 1 out of every 3, 4 years, and you beat Tennessee every other year, every 3rd, 4th year. That's fine at Vanderbilt. I think Clark Lee can get Vanderbilt to that level. I just think right now in the cycle they are in transitioning, they've got a sophomore quarterback that's going to go through the sophomore slump that so many guys in this league have when defenses are game planning for them. Davion Davis for Vanderbilt is as good of a defensive lineman as there is in the SEC. He's terrific. I just think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better right now for Vandy. Clark Lee is asking a lot of this team. He's not shying away from the expectation and from what he wants them to be. And I want to read this quote from SEC Media Days before we go to break. He said his vision for Vandy football was, we can impose our will on our opponent late in the game. He said the vision that there's a 4-quarter game where Vandy is on the sideline looking across the field at an opponent that is wilting under the pressure we're applying because we are the best mentally and physically conditioned team in the country. That's Clark Lee's vision for Vanderbilt. When that 4th quarter started Saturday, it wasn't like can ETSU hang on? It was, is Vandy going to make this close?
Yeah.
It was the opposite. I like Clark Lee's vision. I like that he has high expectations. I like all of that because I think at Vanderbilt, you have to be the best mentally conditioned team. You got the smartest kids of anybody in the SEC, but that's a hard way to start. That's a hard way to transition from what they were going winless last year to then trying to mentally condition these kids that went 0-10 a year ago to be the best mentally conditioned. That's going to take some time. I think it's the way Vandy has to win. It's going to be really hard to do that in week 1 as this team continues to lose.
Yeah, I mean, on its face, that's exactly right.
Right.
And that's what I said. I mean, this is a years-long plan here. I think you're going to have a very patient administration. I think you're going to have a very patient donor set. And I think fan base too, because it's not like it's been good.
Right.
So
no, it can't get worse.
As long as there's a plan.
Right.
Then I think you'll see a lot of patience for that. And I think there should be a lot of patience for that.
If there's a positive for Clark Lee, it's that it literally can't get worse this season. It literally can't.
Not from Saturday.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
The performances could be worse, but the result cannot be worse than what happened Saturday. Vandy fans, hang in there. I'm not trying to pile on you. I'm serious. I really do mean it. I think y'all have a good coach that's going to speak the language of the admin at Vandy. And if anybody's going to get Vandy administration to buy in and to invest, it's one of their own guys. Why would they buy in on James Franklin when they know he's just going to jet for the first big job? That's exactly what he did. Why would they buy in on Derek Mason, who isn't one of their guys, hasn't won a whole lot?
Wanted to interview in Colorado after 2 years.
You're going to buy in on your guy if he's successful, without question. 615-737-1045 is the number. When we come back, Davey, we talk with Brian Wright, Sports Radio WNML. Tennessee's offense was a little worse than expected. Their defense was a little better than expected last week against Bowling Green. And this Saturday might be the biggest game of Tennessee's season. We'll get the report out of Knoxville next on 104.5 The Zone.
This is where the Titans play. 104.5 The Zone.
Sports betting is each other. But in that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of people think when you have tandems at running back, it needs to be two guys who are different, that change of pace. But I look at it as, you have in Small and Evans, you have two guys who are very similar. So when you rotate them, you don't have to change what your offense does. And really, you just injected a new, fresher version of the guy that's probably having success if you're on a long drive. So that's one. The run game's one. Number two is it's a good place to start for Joe Milton. He has a lot of film to watch of mistakes that he made, mistakes that the receivers made. And if he can improve, then this offense is going to have a chance to be really good. People are saying, well, it's time to move on. This is what he did at Michigan, on and on. And I think if all that is ultimately true, then he's not going to be the guy past the first month of the season. But I think the coaches see a guy who has the physical ability that he has, and they will take that and allow him to continue building and continue growing. And if he fixes some of those mistakes, with the ability he has, he's going to be a really special quarterback as the season goes on. I think they look at Hendon Hooker and they look at Harrison Bailey and they see two guys that can certainly get them to 5-7, maybe 7-5. I think they look at Milton and they see a guy who can certainly get them to potentially better than that and have a chance to go into next year with a lot of momentum.
Brian, Davey Shepard here. I was a bit surprised at social media after the game. I thought Milton put in a pretty respectable performance for his first time out in a new offense, and same thing goes for Josh Heupel. So you mentioned some of those things that he needs to watch film on and work on. What are those going into next week? Because I saw a lot of receivers drop balls on missed routes, stuff like that, and I was willing to kind of give him just a pass. Hey, pretty good run out there this week. Now, obviously, the level of difficulty raises a ton moving from Bowling Green to Pitt. So what's that look like for him?
And I don't know that you can necessarily do this against Pittsburgh, but if I'm looking at the Tennessee Tech game in a couple weeks, I'm saying, all right, Joe Milton, I don't want you to complete any long passes. I want everything to be checked down. I want everything to be 15 to 20 yards at a maximum. Because when you look back at the film from Thursday night, those passes were there all night long. And if he hits a few of them, then he probably throws for 250, 275, and we're not even having this conversation. But he missed guys. He had so much time to throw, his clock slowed down, and he just continued to look downfield, and try to make the big play. Well, you're not going to have that kind of time ever again. And I think that might actually help him, that he's going to look and he's going to see, I have to make a decision with the football right now. There it goes, for better or for worse. And I really think looking at what he did on Thursday night, that could be very helpful to him, to have to make a decision and to not have that kind of time to throw down the field. And again, if the clock doesn't speed up, then that's not a direction that they can stay the whole season. I look at him and I look at what he can do, and I think if he sees some of those open guys and he hits them, then you're having a different conversation. So Pittsburgh has a great defense. They bring a lot of pressure. They do a lot of things that are going to cause him problems. Does that help speed up the clock, or does it make it worse? If he looks indecisive again this Saturday after the film study that I'm sure they put him on and the 2 extra days to prepare, then I think you're going to have a real conversation. But ultimately, how efficient can he be? And the other thing that I look at was Tennessee got away from focusing on the run game. They started taking some shots earlier in drives, and that kind of put them behind. Once they started going back to the run game full bore in the second half, it got back on track. And Milton only completed the one pass in the second half, but I think a lot of those things where you mentioned receivers drop balls and guys just weren't running the right route really happened even after they got back in rhythm. So they have an opportunity, again, to build on the film work and make the little adjustments that can be the difference between winning and losing this coming Saturday.
Brian Rice with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Brian, wasn't it crazy hearing Josh Heupel today in his press conference say, we thought the running backs did a nice job based on the adjustments we made at halftime? I forgot that coaches were allowed offensively to adjust at halftime to what the defense was doing.
Yeah, and as the game goes on, I mean, you have coaches that are willing to, okay, well, this game plan was working, then the defense made this adjustment, now we have to make this adjustment. It's a chess match. And I think, over the last few years, you've had coaches who were a little stubborn to stick with what they think was going to work, even when it didn't work. And then you have players that weren't necessarily ready to make adjustments or weren't readily equipped to make adjustments on the sideline. So if you're getting in a back and forth, adjustments are important kind of football game, then I think you can really take that next step. And again, Josh Heupel's not trying to reinvent the wheel. He runs a fairly simple offense, but it's a fairly simple offense that when you can turn up the pace and when you can make those little adjustments to what the defense gives you, then you can go out and execute it. It doesn't mean that you have to throw away half your play call sheet like Scott Frost said he had to do at Nebraska a couple weeks ago against Illinois. I don't know why you would ever admit that, but it's a simple enough offense that you don't have to do that. It's about your execution. It's about you knowing what you're doing better than the defense knowing how to stop it. And if they can execute and they can continue to build, then I think they can continue to move this offense forward. What will it look like against Pitt? I think that's going to be a question of how well they can run the football, plain and simple.
Yep. And it's a Pitt defense that is so good up front. They always have been. You think of Pitt football, you think of Pat Narduzzi, you think of just grinder, just not NFL guys, but just really good guys that get after the passer really well. And on the other side of that, though, Brian, Tennessee defensively, listening to Sports Radio WML pregame coverage, driving up for the game Thursday, Jimmy Himes mentioned this, that I was blown away that Tennessee last year on the ground was giving up 141 yards per game, which stacked up pretty well. I believe it was like Tennessee's best rushing defense in 6 or 7 years. It was something crazy like that. I don't have the stat in front of me, but I actually was impressed by the interior of Tennessee's defensive line against Bowling Green, albeit against a walk-on freshman center, which is not exactly a whole lot of resistance for Elijah Simmons and for Matthew Butler inside. But I was actually somewhat surprised at the push Tennessee was able to get up front, because at times last year that was just non-existent.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the games last year where Tennessee was better than their opponent, and that wasn't a lot, playing an all-SEC schedule, but you didn't get a lot of that push. And so for these guys to have success, no matter what the caliber of opponent was, I think went a long way in validating what Josh Heupel's been teaching them, what Tim Banks is teaching them on defense, all of those things. So the validation there can help them grow. Because the defense is not as talented from a depth standpoint. You mentioned the depth, the whole thing. Their front line is going to be fine. Now, is it going to be a great defense in the SEC? Absolutely not. But is it going to be good enough to get them into a winning position 6 or 7 times this year? It probably would be. But they've all got to stay healthy. They've all got to develop. They've all got to keep moving forward. I think here's 2 things that really help. Really 3 things. You have the best defensive line coach in the SEC, in my opinion, and Rodney Garner coaching a defensive line that did not have a coach last year. They fired Jimmy Brumbaugh, and then Jeremy Pruitt said he was taking it over, and then they assigned a GA, and I don't know that they were actually coached all year. You have Brian Niedermeyer coaching linebackers who, let's just say on-field coaching was not the reason he was on the staff.
Right.
And then in the defensive backfield, I think you had mixed messages because you had Jeremy Pruitt, whose expertise is in the defensive backfield, and then you have a defensive backs coach that it does not appear was speaking the same defensive language.
Right.
So at all 3 levels, the defense, I think, was undercoached last year, and these guys are absorbing the high-level coaching that they're getting right now. And I think it can pay dividends as the season goes on.
Brian, you mentioned the Tennessee running game versus Pittsburgh defense. Pittsburgh defense, I think, gave up 93 yards a game last year, 46 last week against UMass. Now it's UMass, right? So let's not take too much away from that. Here's my question for you, though. My one big takeaway watching the game as not a normal Vols watcher was, can the line keep up what Josh Heupel wants to do? They looked gassed fairly early to me. It looks like a lot of pro-style guys going more up-tempo than they are used to going, especially this early in the season. Can they keep that up as the season goes on, and can they get going fast against Pittsburgh this week?
Well, I think the question to how fast they can go this week comes down to, is Cooper Mays healthy and ready to go at center? If he's not, I think it changes. When Jerome Carvin came in and did a decent job at center, but when they had to shuffle the line, when Mays went out with the ankle injury, it made a difference. And immediately the tempo slowed down. And immediately Bowling Green did some things as well that changed the tempo, and they were able to control the game in the second quarter. So I think that's part number 1. Number 2, are they going to be able to maintain that pace once they get to the SEC schedule? Well, I think this weekend's a great preview of that. It doesn't have to be as fast as they went on a couple of those possessions on Thursday night, but is it up-tempo enough, and do you know your assignments well enough, and can your offensive linemen keep up enough that you don't substitute and the other team gets gassed as well? I think that's going to be a real challenge this weekend. Now, it's only going to be in the lower 80s on Saturday, so I think that helps Pittsburgh a little bit, but they aren't used to the noise. They aren't used to the tempo, And so I wonder how it affects their defense. Can the offensive line go that long? It's not a particularly deep unit, particularly with Cooper Mays hurt. If he can't go, I think it limits how fast you can go just because you don't have another experienced backup over on the sideline to come in. But they're going to try. I think they have worked all summer long from a conditioning standpoint on getting these guys ready to run at this tempo, and the test is going to be this Saturday.
Brian, one last thing for you. I thought Joe Milton, his arm was terrific. I thought I think the talent and the arm ability is there 100%. I thought things started to break down for him when he was having to go to a second or third read, but I wanted him to run more. I think if Joe Milton's internal clock speeds up a little bit and it's, look, hey, this week, let's make it as simple as possible. What are you seeing? If you don't have this, take off. I honestly think that's Tennessee's best way they can beat Pittsburgh. If Joe Milton carries the ball 15 to 20 times and is able to withstand that amount of work on the ground, I don't want to see Joe Milton going to his second or third receiver. I would honestly rather see him run or throw on the run versus, trying to fit something to Cedric Tillman back in the end zone that he somehow just somersaults over a guy and catches. That was the biggest takeaway for me. I just wanted to see Joe Milton run the football more, but I obviously understand why you don't, put your quarterback in harm's way against Bowling Green. This is a game where I feel like Joe Milton could get 15 to 20 carries.
Yeah, he needs to be his own third option.
Right.
Okay, you take the snap, read one's not there, read two's not there. Okay, take off and run. And Joe Milton is a mobile quarterback, but he is more of that pass-first dual threat guy. And so he's not looking to run. I don't think he's ever been coached to look to run as even his second option. So he has to now understand that the third option is going to be him running. It's read one, read two, run. And I do think you'll see that more against Pittsburgh this week. I think he saw guys in his receiving core better than the defensive backfield they were going against. And he was trying to do a little backyard football to let him make plays since the line was giving him enough time. I also think the first thing that the coaches told him, whether they watched film on Friday or Saturday, was you cannot do that at this level.
Right.
This is the only game this year, maybe Tennessee Tech as well, where you're going to have a defense going against you that you can do that against. That is not in the playbook. Do not do that. And if he takes that coaching, then everything's going to be fine. If he doesn't, then you're going to have some other conversations. But I think all signs point to him taking that coaching, taking that direction. And if he does, I think they can be really special on offense as this season goes along, particularly based on the expectation that you have.
Brian Rice, Sports Radio WNML. You can follow him on Twitter at Brian C. Rice. Does a great job with Eric Ainge and our sister station up in Knoxville. Brian, great to catch up with you as always. Thanks for the time.
Gentlemen, thank you. Happy Labor Day to everybody in the Mid-State.
All right. Good stuff as always with Brian. I feel sorry for Brian. I feel sorry for anyone hosting a radio show today in Knoxville because they are already back to, well, why aren't we seeing Bailey out there? That Bailey kid, he's best quarterback we got. Why is he? I meant to ask Brian how many Harrison Bailey calls he'd already gotten. Like, it's crazy that everywhere the backup quarterback is a lot of guys like favorite players.
Yeah.
In Tennessee, it's the third string quarterback.
Right.
Lord. Coming up, I made some money over the weekend. I enjoyed week one of college football. I think there is a clear, easy bet tonight in Ole Miss Louisville. I'm going to make the people some money. That's what I do for you. I'm a nice guy. I'm going to make you some money. Next on 104.5 The Zone.
Get Jason Martin and Ramon Foster on J. Mart and Ramon. Tomorrow morning from 6 to 10 on 104.5.
Ole Miss was up to a 10-point favorite against Louisville, not Louisville, Mississippi. That is down to 8.5 a lot of places. I'm taking Ole Miss minus 8.5 easily. Jeff Lebby, their offensive coordinator, is terrific. He was at UCF with Scott Frost as their offensive coordinator. Was rumored to be coming to Tennessee at one point when Josh Heupel got the job in Knoxville. I think this Ole Miss team is going to be good. I like Matt Corral at quarterback. He started 14 games over the last 2 seasons. 7-2 when he does not throw a pick. 0-5 when he throws an interception over the last couple of seasons. 10th best odds to win the Heisman. How about that? I mean, you kind of get the silly season of college football where just like everyone's on a watch list if they just like start for a Power 5 team. Last year, Louisville gave up 370 yards per game. I think it's going to be a good game. I think Ole Miss wins this by 2 touchdowns. Take Ole Miss in the points.
It seems like free money there. I like you're saying. I don't get the spread coming. I mean, sure,
it came down when
gone.
Kiffin got COVID.
Yeah,
right.
I understand the reasoning. I think it's flawed reasoning, but Vegas knows what it's doing too. So I think jump on that for sure. I'm no Alan Bell, but
which, by the way, this is a free pub for Alan Bell.
We love the guy.
Great dude. Does such a good job covering everything. That's my thing about like the betting guys. It's easy to be like a betting guy for one sport. Like, okay, like I've got winners for college football like every week. Like, yeah, okay, I can get that. Like if you're a betting guy, you're like a 300 level expert on everything. Like it's incredible. Anytime I co-host 3HL, we have Todd Furman on. We could ask him like, hey, like who do you got in the NASCAR race this week? And he's got like 5 options. And there was one where he was like, oh yeah, this type of car does well. These drivers better on a road course. So like, go with Kyle Busch. I'm like, what? You just analyzed, Colts and Seahawks a second ago and gave me every tendency for the Colts in the last 5 years or under Frank Reich. And then you could just turn around and do golf and NASCAR. It's the most impressive niche I think there is in like sports media.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Speaking of niche sports, U.S. Open live right now.
Yeah.
And John Brooksby playing Novak Djokovic. First tournament where 3 Americans make a quarterfinal in quite a while on the men's side of the bracket. So Opelka and Tiafoe both lost yesterday and today.
Okay.
But it's a good one there. Djokovic probably wins pretty straightforward, but he's been playing well. Brooksby upset a few guys already. Unranked player, so fun one to watch today.
And that was talking tennis. It's like, I know you're not a Barstool guy, but it's always funny. Pardon my take, they'll say anything about soccer. They'll like ask one question, they'll just go, and that was talking soccer. All right, what else do we have here? I love it. 615-737-1045 if you want to jump in. Coming up later in the show, we're almost to halftime of the show. It's flown by. It always does when Davey and I are on 1045 The Zone. I'll say it for the both of us. We've got Dr. Kevin Dyson coming up at 4:15. We've got Ben Wright of Broadway Sports Media. We are going to talk a little bit of soccer for 10 minutes.
We'll get there.
10 minutes. I might be yanked off the air. Kevin Mumphrey, our producer, might just start playing the walk-off music if I spend more than one segment on soccer. But we're going to spend half of a segment on soccer coming up at 5:30. The question I have, though, for Kevin, Davey, and we'll get into this in the next segment as well, the transition period from college to NFL and from one NFL system to another at the wide receiver position. Because the Titans have a lot of guys that are making those transitions. You talk about Des Fitzpatrick, Mason Kinsey staying on the practice squad. There's a lot to get into just at the wide receiver position as you look at a Tennessee Titans perspective. So I'm looking forward to kind of picking Kevin Dyson's brain about that because I'm not as worried about that group as so many other people are from a Titans perspective.
I think my question for him is we've heard a lot about the lack of practice out of Julio Jones and the lack of timing that him and Ryan Tannehill have been able to work on. What's the actual level of concern out of a guy like him who's been there and played it before?
I think most of the people that are worried about that aren't at practice. So I'm not taking a shot at anyone personally. I just think like generally the people that are concerned about Julio and his chemistry with Ryan Tannehill are fans that aren't there. And,
I haven't been at a practice, and it does concern me, so I fall into that group for sure.
And I could tell you from being there every day before high school football started, and that kind of took all my time over the past couple of weeks. Like veterans aren't getting a lot of individual work. Or let me correct that. Veterans don't get a lot of teamwork, building timing and the timing routes and the chemistry within team drills as much as the younger guys are. Veterans are there for the individual periods. They're there for, what does an 8-yard out look like? What does Ryan Tannehill want in these situations and individual one-on-one routes on air? Staying fresh, obviously staying healthy is paramount for a guy in Julio Jones that's not a young guy anymore. I would rather him be fresh and ready for week 1 physically than him get team period drills against the Titans 1s and 2s in the defensive secondary on routes that he knows how to run and he knows what the timing looks like. So interested in getting Kevin Dyson's thought on that coming up in hour 3 here in a little bit. Titans did make one roster move just a short while ago while we were talking with Brian Rice. Corey Levin has been waived by the Titans 5 days after he was signed by John Robinson and by this Titans organization. So, Davey, I think the assumption there would be the good news, I think, is right around the corner for either Ben Jones or Nate Davis, or hopefully both of those guys imminently coming off the COVID-19 reserve list.
Yeah, it definitely seems like one of those two guys. 11 was brought in, just last week, 6 days ago, something like that? Yeah, so it has to be. And you need those two guys back if you expect this team. That's a really, really good, like Rhett said earlier, really good front on that Arizona defense. And you need a line as healthy as you can get it, especially with the question mark you've got at right tackle.
Earlier this morning, Titans made a trio of other roster moves. Jeff Swain activated from COVID-19 reserve list. That's your starting tight end on this team, given Anthony Ferkser kind of fitting more into a hybrid slot tight end role. Justin March Lillard was activated and waived from the COVID list, and defensive back Chris Jones waived as well. Halfway through. Davey, just like that, we are 2 hours down and 2 hours to go. We'll reset the headlines when we come back. Look across tonight's college football slate. I know we've mentioned Ole Miss and Louisville. Plus, look ahead a little bit to week 2 in college football. Plus, Kevin Dyson coming up at 4:15. Always good to talk with the doctor himself. Lots more to come. Just getting started here at 104.5 The Zone.
The Vols welcome in the Pittsburgh Panthers to Neyland Stadium for Game 2 of their season.
For Tillman and a diving catch.
I always get to host Labor Day because I'm obviously like on the bench. I don't have a normal spot on the zone. So it's always like this is a holiday for everyone else, but like, Will, you're going to like host. I'm like, okay, cool. It's the easiest day to host Sports Talk Radio, I think, of the year is Labor Day. NFL this Sunday, Titans Cardinals, Titans radio coverage on 104.5 The Zone, of course. You've got college football week 1 just happening. So like, we need to be live, and we are live with people that work here. We're not putting anyone else on here but us and Davey Shepard. And it's the easiest day to host Sports Talk Radio. We need to do a show in the summer where we can like get into the minutia of U.S. men's national team more often when it's the only thing happening. But we're not going to do that today because Titans Cardinals is right around the corner. I can't wait. Getting a taste of tailgating in a lot at Nissan Stadium yesterday. Just I thrived in that environment and setting more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I got down there a little bit later than I would have liked to. A little family outing to the zoo earlier in the day. But AO always puts on a good show. Crowd was strong. We'll get into that with Ben a little bit later. Alan Bell, speaking of, we just talked to him. Ravens working out Le'Veon Bell.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Nice little heel. I mean, not a heel turn. He's been a heel for a while, I think, to a lot of people. I like Le'Veon. I think he's a good player.
It's interesting because J.K. Dobbins obviously out for the season in Baltimore.
Need something.
Gus Edwards is there. Gus Edwards is a good 1B. He's not a 1A.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like him, Mike Davis, like Raheem Mostert, Todd Gurley now has kind of become like a 1. There's a lot of 1B running backs in the NFL. Le'Veon Bell is still a 1A running back as long as he has a good complement to what he does. But man, that'd be a good fit.
So kind of talking about that, we touched on Derrick Henry earlier. Darrington Evans we haven't touched on, who is out injured again. What is 1B for the Titans? Is it just Derrick Henry?
Mekhi Sargent.
I'm telling you. How many touches do you think he gets a game?
5 to 7. But from what the Titans have been, that is 1B for the Titans offense.
Sure.
I mean, really, you don't have a 1B. It really is 2 for what this Titans offense is doing. And the number 615-737-1045 if you want to jump into this conversation. I think Darrington Evans is a bigger loss than what people think at this point because I think this team and this front office was really excited about what he could be for them in 2021. I think the best version of the Titans offense in 2021 is one where Derrick Henry does not carry the ball for 2,000 yards. Looking back at week 1 last year, we're talking about Titans-Broncos, Monday Night Football. You had to pivot pretty quickly to, okay, all right, we need Derrick Henry to win this game for us. Like, quick. I don't think the Titans are going to have to do that. I think the best version of the Titans isn't saying, all right, Derrick, here you go, buddy. You're going to have to win this one for us. You would hope that the options behind Derrick Henry are better to where that doesn't have to happen against bad teams like it did against the Houston Texans in overtime, like it did against the Broncos on the road. Like it did against the Minnesota Vikings on the road.
One that jumps out.
Where Gostkowski and Henry
Houston at the very end of regulation.
And again, if Deshaun Watson gets a 2-point conversion there, we're talking about a very different end of the Titans season. Yep. And, you know, that the margins were so thin last year in so many games, and that's the NFL. I mean, look, you spend enough time around this league, that's just what the NFL is. There are no really bad teams. Even the Texans last year in week 17 will be week 18 this year. Take you to the brink. And Derrick Henry had to carry for 250 in that game to kind of save you. You need Derrick Henry, the older he gets, the further below 2,000 and the more his target becomes lower carries, less touches for me. Because you need him to still be as efficient as he was in years past this year moving forward. I think you get that level of efficiency at a lower total of carries this season.
I agree with the principle. I just don't know that I think Sargent and Evans can be those guys. I think Sargent, I've liked what I've seen just like everybody has. Evans, I always love what I see. It's just I don't see it on the field, enough, right? Like availability is the best ability. So I think that's the thing there. And Robinson and Vrabel clearly very reasonably high on the guy. He's just got to stay healthy, and I think that's what everybody wants to see for just not just for the team, but for him as well as a player.
615-737-1045, the number. No, I think what they like about Darrington Evans is the route tree. And talking to Dave McGinnis about this, it is the things that he can do in the secondary to make a linebacker decide, all right, am I going tight end here or is it running back? It's the choice routes. It's those options in the middle of the coverage. And I think this is where Anthony Ferkser makes a lot of catches as well for the Titans this year, because the route trees of an Anthony Ferkser, an Adam Humphries, and a Darrington Evans, they play three different positions, similar route trees and what they can do in kind of the mesh points of a zone defense, making a linebacker and a safety pick. Because if a linebacker or a safety has to have the option out of the backfield for Darrington Evans, that's one less guy that's keying in on A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and really Anthony Ferkser too. That's where I think this Titans offense is going to miss the route tree of a Darrington Evans, because Mekhi Sargent does not have the ability catching passes out of the backfield that Darrington Evans does. That's what I think this Titans team is still missing. Dion Lewis was supposed to be that guy. Dion Lewis wasn't close to being that guy.
No.
He retired in Nashville. He collected game checks, and by the time he was gone, no disrespect to the guy, just wasn't the same player.
Name that you haven't brought up is Josh Reynolds. I think is going to have a season. I think he's really flown under the radar.
Yeah.
Obviously, bringing Julio. Look, I think Josh Reynolds would have been like a fine WR2 off of AJ Brown.
Right.
Wouldn't have felt great about it.
Would have been okay.
Would have been okay.
Would have been a downgrade on what you had, but
Yes.
it's still, when you ask the question, what does this offense need?
I was prepared to go in on. I thought it would be a push with what Corey Davis's production was in Nashville.
Well, you look at what Corey Davis did in 2019 and what Josh Reynolds did in 2020.
Exactly.
It's almost identical.
Exactly.
It's about 750, 800 yards. The touchdown production was there. Josh Reynolds is a good player.
Good player.
And I think it helps you to have the same type of player. You've got big and physical at running back and at your top three receivers.
And I just think Reynolds is a guy who can win because of those other matchups.
Right.
He can win because of how dangerous Ferkser can be on that route. He can win because A.J. Brown and Julio are going to force double coverage at some point between the two of them, and obviously because of what Derrick Henry does to the box. So I think Josh Reynolds probably wins as much as anybody right alongside Anthony Ferkser.
So Josh Reynolds last season, I'll correct the exact yardage spot here. Josh Reynolds in 2020 for the Los Angeles Rams, 16 games, 13 starts, was targeted 81 times. That was a career high. 52 catches, another career high. Almost doubled his previous career high in 2018 with 29 catches. 618 yards, 11.9 yards per reception, and 2 touchdowns with a long of 40 yards.
Real quick, to go along with the Levin cut, Chris Jones just cut as well. Tom Pelissero tweets that out. So
Yep.
I would assume that means Davis and Ben Jones back very, very soon.
So, absolutely. I agree with you on that. So, you want to know how close Corey Davis 2019 is to Josh Reynolds 2020? Corey Davis in 2019 for the Tennessee Titans, 43 catches, 69 targets for 601 yards. So Josh Reynolds in 2020 had more yards, more targets, and more receptions than Corey Davis did for the Titans in the previous year before his big jump. John Robinson is betting on a guy with a different skill set in a contract year, on a one-year contract with this Tennessee Titans team, making the same kind of jump that Corey Davis did from 19 to 20 with the most efficient quarterback in the NFL in Ryan Tannehill. It's a safe bet.
Yeah.
And it allows you to ease Julio Jones back into things and him be the red zone guy, him be a deep threat kind of guy. When you talk about players that are benefiting the most from the addition of Julio Jones, to me, it's either Derrick Henry or Josh Reynolds. I don't know if there's anyone else. Anthony Ferkser maybe, but I think Josh Reynolds is as thankful to have Julio Jones as anybody else is on this Titans team.
Yep.
615-737-1045, the number. I just can't. I forgot the feeling of like a guy shows up with a Walgreens bag. This is not going to be a shady comment. Trust me. It's the start of this story sounds really sketchy. Like a guy carrying like a 18 pack of beers, and you're just like you're out of time to tailgate, but you're about to walk in the stadium. So you're just like handing beers to people you see. You're like, hey, wait, we got 24 of these and kickoffs in 30 minutes. Just go ahead. I forgot how fun just I don't know, just walking to a stadium and seeing people. And we will talk about what happened at Nissan Stadium yesterday because we're obviously soccer people and that's what we do. But it was fun. Good atmosphere yesterday at Nissan Stadium for U.S. soccer against Canada. But, of course, coming up next is going to be Kevin Dyson. The skill sets of all of these guys, the skill sets of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Josh Reynolds. I can't remember who specifically it was, but I remember it was somebody on the Buck Rising show over the last month saying, when you have a big physical running back, you want big physical receivers. When you have a small, shifty running back, you want smaller, shiftier receivers because they complement one another and do similar things. Because when you have big physical A.J. Brown, Julio Jones on the outside, you have to devote bigger, more physical players to stop bigger physical receivers. The Titans, after they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, decided, all right, we need smaller, shiftier defensive backs to stop Tyreek Hill. Logan Ryan was their slot guy. He wasn't a speed guy to match up with Tyreek Hill. So then you've got to devote a lot of different – you have speed guys, you have power guys. I'm kind of like thinking through this process as I say it. But for the Chiefs, their problem is you have so much speed on the field that when you budget your roster defensively, you say we need a certain amount of guys to stop bigger physical receivers. Caleb Farley, the new guy to do that for the Titans defense. And you need smaller, shiftier guys, speedier guys to stop the twitchier receivers, Jackrabbit Jenkins. When one team just has one type of those things, you don't budget just to stop one. You budget to stop a little bit of both with your defensive backs. So a defense can only have, one or two corners or safeties that are bigger, physical, more muscular corners. Who do you stop? Who do you choose? All right, this is our big physical guy. Do we devote him for Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, or Josh Reynolds? Because Josh Reynolds is a bigger physical slot receiver as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say earlier when you said, hey, I know how Arthur Smith schemed a game. What is this season going to be like on offense? Again, I don't know. Jury remains to be, the verdict remains to be seen there.
Right.
We haven't seen it in a real game. That being said, I know who Julio Jones is.
Right.
I know who A.J. Brown is. I think I know pretty well who Josh Reynolds is, too. I think it's a lot like Corey Davis, like you just said. So I think there are opportunities to win downfield for this team. And I think that's something that has been lacking. Never been a quick strike team. Doesn't need to be a quick strike team.
Right.
But to be a grinded out team with serious quick strike capability is awesome.
And the other thing about that, too, before we go to break, talking about these, the Titans receivers, the quick strike ability, I think you're going to see A.J. Brown in the slot a little bit this year. A.J. Brown is so good on those in-breaking routes, those slants. When he gets the ball in his hand, he just turns into a running back. The ability to have Josh Reynolds play on the outside, you get mismatches for days with A.J. Brown lining up against a nickel corner in the slot. And you make somebody put their nickel or put their slot guy outside and match up with Reynolds or Brown or with Jones, and you put A.J. Brown in the slot, good luck.
Yep.
Excited to see that offense on the field this Sunday for sure. Coming up, though, we're going to get a scouting report on these receivers from a man who has put on the two-tone blue and who has been a Titans wide receiver. How does a rookie transition to the NFL, like Des Fitzpatrick is trying to do to earn a spot on the Titans practice squad? And how does Julio Jones and Josh Reynolds, how do they change the language and change the timing in year one with Ryan Tannehill as their quarterback? We'll discuss that and much more with Kevin Dyson coming up next on 104.5 The Zone.
Blaine Bishop puts it all in layman's terms.
I don't know how you flip the switch from being in the huddle and then you talk to us completely different. So we all understand what it is.
because that's life, right? You know, we all have a diverse experiences, and we all come from different backgrounds, but we can all learn from one another. And I think that's the essence of the show is, you know, despite our differences, we all have similar stories that we can all benefit from hearing. Just sometimes just a reminder. Sometimes it is motivational. Sometimes it's just good conversation, good content, good entertainment. So, you know, we like so far the direction that we're heading, but, you know, we still want to look to do some bigger and better things and continue to progress and get better at our craft as well. It's like anything else. You know, you still want to get better at what you do. You evaluate yourself and you try to get better each time you get out.
Yeah, it's a really great podcast, and if you're new to our podcast network, you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. 3, The Pro Way, every Monday morning, 8 o'clock, as well as the Zone podcast feed. So certainly add that to your podcast rotation if you have not already. All right, Kevin, getting into Titans and Cardinals, I love that it's finally a game week, and we can talk about real football with real starters. That means real things. And one of the biggest storylines, obviously, when you add Julio Jones to your team, has been the lack of time that he's had with Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, neither of those guys played in training camp. Julio Jones has been out a lot with a very minor injury that I don't think anyone expects him to miss week 1. But from your perspective of working with a new quarterback, of coming into a new system with a new language, how much of a concern is it that Julio Jones hasn't had a lot of time to work with Ryan Tannehill this offseason?
Well, I think there's a little bit of concern, obviously. I think there's a familiarity that comes with playing with each other. You know, you want to see his catch radius, which we all know, watching him play over the last 10 years, his catch radius is pretty big. But as a quarterback, you still want to know where guys prefer the ball, where you can kind of put it. Because you know you're not going to be perfect on that side of the ball when you got 300-pound linemen bearing down at you. So, you want to see that. You want to see his body movement, when he breaks his cuts on certain routes. But a lot of things are based on areas and timing, you know. So, you know, there is a concern. But when you talk about putting a placement of a ball, put it in the coffin corner, what we call, for instance, in the end zone, and that's the receiver's aiming point. You just got to get to that spot, and that's where the quarterback's trying to put it. And those types of things, that's just me going to being an athlete and making a play, and the quarterback being an athlete and making a throw. And so those things I'm not overly concerned. My concern would be, you know, that conditioning, that initial, hey, what do I have on this play? What's my reads? What's my adjustments? Is he going to make the right adjustments because of familiarity of the offense and things of that nature? Are they going to be on the same accord? Do they see the same adjustment? Are they reading the safeties and the linebackers the same? And do they get the same read? Because that can end up being a mistake for one or the other, meaning I saw this, the quarterback saw something different, I threw it to that particular spot, or that what I thought I saw, and we're not on the same page, and there's a turnover. So that's more or less anything. The timing of it all is one thing, and I think guys have played football long enough that you can kind of overcome that a lot faster than the intricacies of the game and figuring out where you like the ball, and, for instance, like our adjustments on the fly.
Well, and Kevin, too, how much of that can you really simulate in practice? Because it sounds like a lot of the things you're saying, the only way you really learn the chemistry and learn the full game speed of the timing and reading what the defense is giving you, it seems like the best way to do that is just in a game setting outside of the preseason. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Somewhat, but I also think film study plays a part in that. There's, you know, we get playbooks each week with some data, and it says on particular down and distances, this is their go-to coverages, and this is their go-to rotation, their go-to blitzes and things and stunts and things of that nature. So when you take your pre-snap alignment and your account of what's out in front of you, you know, then it becomes the knowledge of watching film and recognizing those coverages and schemes and things that you have been studying all week. So, yeah, it's a fair assessment just because the game picks up, the urgency picks up, but you pick up a lot of things from, experience. You've seen it, done it, heard it before. You've been playing the game long enough. And then the other part of that is film study and recognition. Now, there might be some things where I'm curious to see, because they haven't had everybody out there on game day, how are teams going to play them? Are they going to, in essence, lock up the two outside receivers and make somebody else beat them? Are they going to play zone, keep everything in front of them, and make Tannehill make reads? Like, that's the stuff I want to see how they play, because to me, you can't sit back in two shell a whole lot, because your concern is deuce in the backfield and running with their backs to the ball. So you got to be mindful of that as well. And how you're going to get an extra guy in the run game compared to being in coverage. And so, that's what I'm more interested in, how people are actually going to play the receiving core this year.
We were talking about it earlier before you came on, and Josh Reynolds has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle here once the Julio edition came along, and then you've got A.J. Brown. Obviously, Derrick Henry does everything he does every single week. Is Josh Reynolds maybe the biggest winner on this lineup from the Julio Jones signing?
Yeah, you like to believe so. He's going to get his fair share of opportunities. He's going to probably, in essence, get a fair share of one-on-ones with maybe the number 2, number 3 defensive back, and that's going to be up for him to win those battles. But again, I think the coordinators and the team, they'll do some things in essence of trying to move guys, maneuver, maybe do some combination routes with the 3 of them or just the 2 big guys, and see exactly how they can take advantage of people's alignments and defensive schemes. So, I think, yes, he will benefit some because he will be isolated, I would assume, because they're going to pay so much attention to the other 2. But at the end of the day, I think coordinators and things of that nature are so smart nowadays to put their best guys in a position to be successful that I think you're going to see them move those guys from one side to the other, inside and out, trying to get matchups that's in their favor. And so, not that he'll be an odd man out because he's going to get his opportunities, but they're still going to try to find a way to get the 2 big guys the ball.
Different position, still a pass catcher, though. What do you expect to see out of Anthony Firkser? He's had a good camp. He kind of shown in moments last year that he could really get out there and catch the ball and do well when Jonnu Smith was out via injury. What are your hopes for him going into 2021?
Well, I think he just continues to grow and progress and be productive. I mean, their eyes are not necessarily on him. He's not coming in expected to have Travis Kelce type numbers, right? He's just coming in, and when the opportunity comes to present itself, you're supposed to make that play. It might be 2 in one game, it might be 8 the next, but he's got to make those plays that come to him and keep the defense honest, so to speak. So, and I think he's very capable of that. You're not asking him to be that dominant tight end that we've seen in the National Football League, and it's kind of has grown into somewhat of a tight end-driven league, if you will, tight ends that can run and stretch the defense. And so he doesn't have to be that, assumingly so, that he don't have to be that with this team based on the caliber receivers that they have. So it just comes down to him making the most of his opportunities that come to him and making those key plays when he's given a chance.
Dr. Kevin Dyson with us here on 104.5 The Zone. I'm curious, too, when you have a guy like Anthony Firkser that his skill set and his route tree is more suited for a slot receiver, right? He's basically a bigger, more physical slot receiver. When you have the deep threats that you have in Julio Jones and A.J. Brown and even Josh Reynolds to an extent as well, having that kind of guy who's so good at finding the soft spot in the zones and finding the soft spot in the coverage underneath, it seems to me like Anthony Firkser's skill set really complements what the Titans have at other positions, because you've got big and physical guys at your top 3 receiver positions, and then you've kind of got a big physical slot that's more of a tight end as well. He seems to me as much a piece of being kind of the matchup nightmare in this offense, just as much as some of the other bigger names.
Well, I think so. But I think in essence, this day and age, you got to be multidimensional. I mean, you can't just say I'm an inside receiver or I just run inside type routes or intermediate short routes. I think you have to be able to scare a defense. If I always know that my tight end is going to sit there and he's not going any further than 10, 11, 12 yards, I'm just going to squat on him and I can play the other guys some type of way. But he's going to have to be multidimensional. He's going to have to stretch the defense as well and create a threat being able to stretch the defense in order to open up some things for the other guys underneath. Because the football, the further you go down the field, the percentages get lower and lower. So high percentage football is keeping that ball as close to the cuff as you can and getting high percentage throws and let the athletes be athletes. We've seen it time and time again. That's why A.J. Brown has been amongst the leaders since the first couple of years in the league of yards after the catch. He's not catching bombs every play. He's catching drive routes, drag routes, crossing patterns, and running after the catch. And that's when he's had the ability to have guys on the inside, even outside of him, to be able to stretch the defense so he can come and do his work underneath. So I think Firkser has to be multidimensional. He can't just be a guy that's just going to be on 3rd and 4, here he comes, and that sort of thing. And so I think that's where his growth and maturation of a quote-unquote receiving tight end will come to play, and how well he's able to adapt to a more impactful role on this team.
Kevin, I'm curious to get your first impressions of Elijah Molden as a guy that played against a lot of different kinds of defensive backs in the National Football League. This is, to me, kind of a throwback kind of defensive back. Talking with Blaine Bishop, he's like, he reminds me of me when I was that age playing in the NFL. How much can the Titans do with a guy like that to match up with the weapons that Arizona has all over the field this weekend?
Well, I think it goes by what I just said, being multidimensional, right? I think one thing I love about him and his abilities, I feel like you can put him at 4 different positions, being nickel, either corner, and maybe a strong or even a free safety. He might be able to play all secondary spots depending on the game plan and where he's at. That's the kind of skill set he is showing, and I love that about him. He doesn't know what he doesn't know yet, right? He hasn't seen all the routes, all the combinations. He hasn't seen all the different abilities of some of the receivers in the National Football League. He hasn't seen all the concepts and how people will attack him and his youngness and his inexperience. He hasn't seen all that yet. But from a competitive side and his ability, just watching him just in the first few games, first few snaps, he has such a knack for the football. He's a playmaker. He's a hustler. He goes hard every play. He's just a competitive DB, and I think that in itself is going to help him grow and grow fast, and that's going to help that defense grow and grow fast. Because once your younger guys start picking up and making plays, them veterans, they can, it's not that they can sit back and relax, but it just makes them a little more comfortable. They don't feel like they have to make up for that young guy and worrying about, does he understand? Does he get it read? Did he get the check? Is he in the right position? They don't have to compensate for it. They can just go out and do their job, and that is a luxury that a lot of defenses, when you get a young guy that just gets it, they love it, and I think he's in that mold.
Kevin, one more before we get you out the door here. The Cardinals come to Nissan Stadium this Sunday, season opener. What's a matchup you're looking forward to in this game? It seems really, really kind of schemed up for Titans offense versus Cardinals defense. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. What's something you're looking forward to?
Well, I think in natural, he's a game plan problem. I mean, Kyler Murray is a defensive nightmare, a guy that has a strong arm, cannon arm, accurate, and can move around. And he's little. He hides behind them big old linemen. Like how do they play that? We saw the stress and what happened last year on the secondary when didn't have a consistent pass rush. So when you got a guy like a Kyler Murray or whatnot, we can go down and list all these quarterbacks nowadays that are mobile, super mobile, athletic, that can run, can throw, and running like the wind. What do you do? How do you game plan against that? And I'd be interested to see how they do. Do they corral him? Do they spy him? Do they slow rush him, make sure he stays in the pocket? Do they feel like he can't throw in the pocket? Is he better on the run? Like, what's their attack mode to Kyler Murray? I think that's going to be the key for me on the defense side of the ball. Offensive football, I think both teams will have their struggles. They'll have their successes. It's a matter of who makes the fewer mistakes, because it is early in the year, and we have seen that teams haven't been playing their starters. There's rust that you got to knock off, and who makes the fewest mistakes on offense, gives their team a better chance to win. But how are you scheming against a guy like Kyler Murray, and especially early on in the year when we're talking about it's potentially going to be hot, your conditioning? You haven't played a full game since last January. So what does that look like? I think that's a big key for me.
Kevin Dyson has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. You can find him on Twitter at KTDyson87, and find 3 The Pro Way wherever you listen to podcasts. Him and Todd Campbell, Joey Kent do such a terrific job with that as well every Monday here on our podcast network. Kevin, always great to catch up to you and catch up with you and talk Titans receivers. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
All right, Kevin Dyson. That's good stuff.
Great stuff.
I think it's one thing for us to have the conversation of like, oh no, Julio Jones isn't getting reps and isn't playing with Ryan Tannehill, but that's a guy that knows, how to get chemistry with a new offensive coordinator, a new system, a different quarterback. despite the fact that he had a lot of number 9 throwing him the football in Tennessee. I think it's a reasonable point to be concerned about the conditioning and the snap count not being there.
Yep.
Especially with Julio Jones last season. You look at his snap counts from 2020, 468 snaps in 2020.
Here's the thing, though. I think he could have played more.
Oh, without a doubt.
If they would have been a relevant club late in the season, and they weren't. So,
just like you want to save,
he didn't play him. You're right.
Just like you want to save Derrick Henry though for playoffs.
Yep.
You're not going to see Julio. Titans fans are going to be calling into this station this time next week, complaining about not seeing Julio Jones enough. I guarantee it. And that's the other bright side of having a guy with a somewhat similar skill set in Josh Reynolds and A.J. Brown. You can do the same things with all 3 of those receivers with only 1 or 2 of them on the field. And the Titans play a lot of 2 tight end personnel, some 3 tight end personnel, where they have a tackle-eligible guy in red zone. They'll have Kari Blasingame as kind of another lead blocker at the fullback position, who's basically just a tight end that's lining up right in front of Derrick Henry.
Another great preseason for him, too.
Absolutely. Titans have so many sets that are a 1 wide receiver set that you have built-in rest for these receivers without taking away the dimension of having them on the field. Like the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have Julio Jones. They're not going towards, 12 personnel towards their 13 personnel as much as the Tennessee Titans are. If they're taking Julio Jones off the field, it's either a 3 wide receiver set or a 4 wide receiver set more times than not. The Titans' base set is really 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, 1 back. That's where the Titans can be different and can build in rest and ease somebody like Julio Jones along. The snap counts might be lower. The targets, I don't think, are going to be much lower, though. He's going to be targeted more efficiently for when he is on the field. They just don't need him on the field blocking for a, dive up the middle with Derrick Henry. 615-737-1045 if you want to jump in. What's your biggest question mark heading into week number 1 for this Titans team? That's kind of been our theme of the show today, talking with Rhett Bryan and talking with Kevin Dyson there just now. Plus, Davey, let's take a look around the NFL in week number 1. There are lots of good games that we can spend a lot of time on, and a couple of them involving teams within the AFC South. I'll look ahead to week number 1 around the league. Coming up next, here with you until 6 o'clock, taking you up to the Mike Vrabel Show. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It's Thursday Night Football as Tom Brady and the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers host the Dallas Cowboys to start the NFL season. Coverage starts Thursday night at 6:30.
He was in the COVID isolation protocols. 6 o'clock, we'll take you right up to it. A little sense of normalcy for your day. Getting some Mike Vrabel for you at 6 o'clock today on 104.5 The Zone. Titans back on the practice field today. David Long not spotted on the practice field today, per Jim Wyatt of TennesseeTitans.com. Chris Jackson, who's been sidelined for a good bit of recent practices, was back. Receivers coach Rob Moore, who missed the final preseason game against Chicago, he was back on the practice field as well. Michael Pruitt, back in number 85, since being claimed from the waived players. San Francisco, right?
Yeah, San Francisco. And you have to say that's some good business from John Robinson.
It's not bad.
A lot of people were questioning, should he have got a contract from the Titans early on? You let him walk, seem pretty confident in that decision, say Ferkser's going to carry the load, and then you end up getting the guy back either way. So not bad business.
No starting right tackle. If you missed that part of our conversation with Rhett Bryan at about 2:15, David Quesenberry, Ty Sembrello, and Kendall Lamb, three guys that Mike Vrabel mentioned when asked about who his starting right tackle would be. This, to me, coming into training camp, was the most underrated aspect of concern I had for this team, was replacing Dennis Kelly. Now I think since Dylan Radins is clearly not ready to start week one, more people are discussing this is kind of a concern at right tackle, because Dennis Kelly was not a good left tackle filling in for previous injury stints by Taylor Lewan, but he was a very serviceable right tackle.
Yep.
He was not a negative. And I would even say last year he was a bit of a positive. Like, he was just good at right tackle through most facets of the game. And all the Titans really need at right tackle, don't be a net negative. You've got a really good offensive line around you.
Right.
Taylor Lewan is one of the best left tackles in the game still, although he's getting up there a little bit. Roger Saffold is one of the best left guards without question. Ben Jones is the model of consistency in the NFL. And Nate Davis is turning into a bit of a stud at right guard. You just can't be a net negative at right tackle for the Titans. So that'll continue to be a storyline, but Mike Vrabel addressed that after practice today as well.
And here's the thing I'd say about Kelly. I think he was a very serviceable right tackle.
Yeah.
I'd say even broached into the area of good last year.
Right.
That being said, I think how much everyone liked him, the bit, the long hair, the Undertaker thing,
Without a doubt.
kind of skews what people are thinking they have to replace.
Right.
So all that being said, really like Dennis Kelly. Think he was a great player for this team and the role he was asked to perform at. I think that the guys on the roster are capable of replacing that performance.
I would agree. And I would set the over-under at week 8.5 or 9, where Dylan Radins is starting at a position on the Titans offensive line. It might just not happen this year. I mean, Dylan Radins, you have the luxury of, this is a guy who didn't play football last year for North Dakota State. Otherwise, I think we're talking about a much different conversation. If Dylan Radins plays his final year of FCS football that was moved to the spring, I think he's in a much different spot coming into camp. And we talked about this with Rhett earlier on in the show as well. It's a tough transition for any rookie lineman to make, especially from the FCS level, especially when you didn't play your last year of football. So it's kind of unfortunate that the Titans' top 2 draft picks are both in that boat. Caleb Farley didn't have a 2020 season. Dylan Radins didn't have a 2020 season. So really, your first guy that's going to be a day one player on this team is Elijah Molden.
And
he played in 2020.
A day one player.
And you give yourself the luxury of bringing on a second-round pick that's more of a longer-term project by getting a third-round pick who's starting day one, against the Cardinals on Sunday. Because if Elijah Molden isn't really starting for the Titans Sunday, we're talking again about, all right, this is 2 straight draft classes where it's taken a little longer than you would like for a lot of these guys to get integrated into the team. That's not as big of a worry when you hit on Elijah Molden. And granted, the guy hasn't played a game yet. He could still just be a, preseason hero, and we do see that. But from everything we hear and all the things that we see, and people like Kevin Dyson, who was just on talking so glowingly about that guy, it sounds like they definitely hit on Molden.
Yeah, from everybody, even Rhett talking earlier, you guys have been around it, you've seen more of it, but just look at the performance in the game. The guys played well. Yes, the regular season is a different animal. this is a good Arizona offense. Dyson mentioned it earlier. Kyler Murray just has that ability to make those off-schedule throws, hide himself a little bit. Good receiving core. So he's up against it in game one. It's not some easy, Sam Darnold type scenario.
Right.
It's going to be a hard quarterback to play against.
Or Drew Lock like last year.
Yeah, and better corners than Elijah Molden have struggled against Kyler Murray offenses and Cliff Kingsbury's offenses.
It's going to be a really fun first week of football. I know we're going to get into this coming up in the final hour as well, but Indy and Seattle. I set the over-under in the green room before the show at 1.5 wins for Indianapolis through week 5. I mean, you look at their schedule, absolutely brutal. Having to start with Russell Wilson and a Seahawks team that, for the record, by the way, I don't think is going to be great. I think they're good, but Pete Carroll's a good coach. I think they're 6-10, 7-9, just because everyone else in that division is so good. And you have to play Arizona twice, the Rams twice, who I'm very high on, and the 49ers
I think we
twice.
might have the entire NFC West in different positions.
Really?
I think so.
It's the most fascinating division in football.
It is.
I don't think there's another option.
And to be clear, I think the fourth place team in the NFC West could be like 8 and 9.
Yeah. Which a couple of years
pretty
ago,
good.
when the Rams were the team that made the playoffs at what? No, it was Rams Seahawks that were.
Yeah, Seahawks made it the playoffs at 7
and 9, I believe, and they won.
Yeah.
Which it's so funny that every year that happens, the team wins. And the exception was last year with Washington and playing Tampa. But they kind of gave Tampa like a run for their money. They played them closer than the Chiefs did.
Exactly.
Oh, goodness. Steelers-Bills is going to be great. I mean, that early window. Eagles-Falcons, don't know really anything about either of those teams.
I think they're both pretty bad.
I think so, too. I don't think Jalen Hurts is a good starting quarterback. But I'm interested to see what that team looks like. Does Gardner Minshew play?
Unfortunately for the Eagles, I think they've got bigger issues than Jalen Hurts.
I would agree.
I think they're pretty bad.
Yeah.
I just think it's a bad team this year. The Giants will probably beat them out. I think they'll be the worst team in the NFC East. The big one I've got my eyes on is that Chiefs-Browns at the 3:30 time slot. It's going to be a great football game.
Chiefs -6 in that?
In Cleveland?
No, it's in Kansas City.
Okay.
It's interesting. Baker Mayfield with a new head coach, with Kevin Stefanski, and the confidence that guy had throwing the football at the end of last year, looks like a different player. There's nobody happier that Freddie Kitchens has run out of there than Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, so what I want to see is we've seen Baker perform well in 2 seasons when the expectations were lowered. We've seen him perform very poorly in the 1 season which the expectations were high.
Right.
Now the expectations are high again. I'm not saying they can't do it, but they haven't done it yet. So I want to see them when everyone's looking forward to, hey, Cleveland comes to town. Remember that start of that 2019 season? Tennessee goes there week 1 and absolutely rolls them.
Uh-huh.
Derrick Henry, 85-yard, I think, screen touchdown. It was just a shellacking they took.
Yeah.
And that set the tone for them for the rest of the season, where everybody was high as gas. They were going to win the division, good playoff dark horse, yada, yada, yada. And I think they had a losing record. They didn't make the playoffs. So that being said, I think they're better now. And the weird thing on that team is the X factor is Odell Beckham.
I know.
What does he do? Who is
Really
he?
is.
We don't know.
Right.
So a guy whose game is based off of explosiveness like that, via injury, he's been hurt multiple times, he's getting older. Who is he going to be? And, maybe he is the difference for that team.
Do you know when the last time the Browns won a week 1 game was?
No idea, but I'm excited to hear.
It's been 17 years.
Who they play? The Chiefs?
They have the Chiefs.
I think it's 18 years.
Watch this be the one game they win in week 1.
Make sense.
It's like we're playing the best team in the league. Got it. They lost to the Ravens in week 1 last year, and it was their 17th straight. 16th straight. This article from last year says the Browns haven't won week 1 in 16 years. So it's 17 years. So they've lost 16 straight. Unbelievable. 615-737-1045. The number when we come back, Davey, the beginning of the final hour. The 4th quarter. Throw your 4s in the air, people of Nashville. Keep 2 hands on the wheel. Like if you're at a red light, 4 fingers in the air. 4th quarter, 4th hour, next. 1045 The Zone.
J-Mart and Ramon are not afraid to put themselves out there with a bold prediction.
I've been fighting saying this out loud.
Who would, Jay?
I'm picking the Titans to win the Super Bowl.
Tomorrow, starting at 6 on 1045 The Zone.
This is Brandon Tierney with a CBS Sports Minute. Every year, teams try to turn the trick, going from the bottom of the basement all the way to the top floor of the penthouse. Of the 8 teams that
Walker Hayes sings this song.
I didn't need to know that. But I do now.
So
Sounds exactly like the guy who sings this song.
odds are, if you watched half of a quarter of a college football game, you heard this Applebee's song.
At least once.
Which I say Applebee's song. This is like I don't want to be mean to a company that could maybe be a potential
But
sponsor.
listen, they put it
of the
on as a
station.
commercial.
No, I know, but like I
So-
work for a radio station, and like I can't really like say bad things about potential people that would be sponsors. I don't know if Applebee's is a zone sponsor.
Yeah, I don't know.
That might change now based on what
Good.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
but oh goodness. No, like it but if I had to tell you, if you had to guess like what the guy's name is that sings that song,
Something
Walker
like that.
Hayes is the perfect. It's a guy from Mobile, Alabama, is where he's from. But you can't really tell because he's wearing like tight jeans and like those like low like or the high like Timberland like brown boots. It's like
And so the song took off from TikTok.
yes, this
Like
is
that-
a TikTok song.
It is a TikTok song.
and there's a
which,
dance that goes with it that they
You
all
know,
do in the
a very
commercial.
weird thing. I was talking with a buddy who is a songwriter. John from Nightly, who
Yeah.
you know and you're a fan of.
You've heard some music from them earlier on today's show.
Talking with him, and like there's production companies like doing rights for TikTok songs,
Oh.
and they're like that's a target for labels now to say,
Hurts my head.
oh no, we think this could pop on TikTok. So to what was his name, Wesley Thaxton something, the guy's name
Walker.
Walker.
Hayes.
There we go, Walker Hayes.
Wesley
Sorry.
Thaxton.
To his credit, what he did is what a lot of people are trying very, very hard to do right now, and is have a song that pops on TikTok, and he did that. So credit to him. I'm not going to hate on him either, but I could never hear the song again and live a very happy life. I think.
Well, don't get on TikTok because
Or watch a
it'll-
football game.
Yeah, right. I saw Steve Cavendish, our buddy, tweeted this out, I think during the Tennessee game. Because I was later to this because I was in Knoxville for
Right.
the game on Thursday. So I didn't hear any of this. And he said, like, do these people know that, like, hearing the same thing over and over
Makes
and
you not
over
want the product.
makes you not want it?
And those Facebook commercials are just as bad as that.
Oh,
the Facebook group
Lord.
commercials.
Those are, I thought you were just talking about, like, Facebook commercials before a video. Because that's one of my pet peeves.
Oh, yeah.
Is when there's like and ESPN is the worst about this. You'll get a 15-second or 20-second soundbite that has a 30-second ad in front of it that you can't skip. Like, why would I sit here for an ad that is longer than the video I want to be watching? This is common sense, people. Common sense. Lord, I hope I'm not just losing the station any money. This is if there's any day to go after the corporate man,
Labor Day.
it's Labor Day. Look, our bosses are listening. 615-737-1045. I say that jokingly. If any of you are listening, I greatly enjoy my job here and would like to keep it. Seahawks, Colts, we mentioned that. Steelers, Bills. We're going through week one
And we
NFL
did plug
game.
Duke's mayonnaise pretty well earlier.
We
so-
did. Hey, I'll tell you what. I mean, Jay Martin and Moen have done such a good job getting Barbasol through Rhett's I'm Scott Graham, which, again, this is where I shouldn't say my age because I can do, like, the Anchorman thing and people will think I'm just 40. Just do a whole show like Scott Graham, like Rhett does. They've done so much goodwill with a sponsor that maybe I can just undo some of it, and we're just back to square one. No, we kid. We love all the great people that partner with us. And look, it's a good time to be partnering on 104.5 The Zone as we get ready for busy season. My roommate's an accountant, and he was going through like his busy season last March. And I mean, this is our busy seasons don't overlap, obviously, because football is kind of busy season. And I do play-by-play with UT in the spring, and which last year was like, if you talk to anyone who does play-by-play, Lucas Panzica, our buddy, can confirm this as well. Like, it was like the busiest spring in the history of broadcasting last year. Because you have sports that are usually just played in the fall that were moved to the spring. So, like, he would go through his busy season in like March, and I'd just be sitting chilling. Because I just got done with mine, and it's fall through beginning of spring, and now it's all fun. I don't want to come across as complaining, but it is a busy time, and it is a very fun time to be very busy as football begins for those of us here. And on that note as well, 104.5 The Zone's Week 4 game of the week with me and Lucas Panzica this Friday night. I know you were tuned in last week.
Yeah, after I got out of the stadium for the soccer game, yeah.
That's right. Had a Hendersonville Beach last week. And those highlights, too, are posted on our podcast network as well every Friday. But Lucas and I will be at Creekwood High School against Ron Slay's Pearl Cone Firebirds. There is nobody that loves the Pearl Cone Firebirds more than Ron Slay. I think I can confidently say that.
What a great representative, too.
Oh,
that's cool.
If Ron Slay represents you in any way, here again, I'm making the station money. This is good. If you if you want like the best possible face for your company, for your school or team or show or radio station, Ron Slay is your guy. Like, for those of y'all that don't know him, like off the air too, like the energy and like the good vibes that guy brings on 3HL and on the air, that's exactly who that guy is off the air too. Like, he'll walk in every day and he'll walk, like the light will be on, Rhett will be recording something. He just walks in, like dabs him up, like walk in, he just goes around, Brett Batchelor, our digital assistant, fist bump to him, always, brother Boling, how are you? Fist bump to me, like that guy's a king. Absolute king. There's no doubleheader for Monday Night Football this year. We haven't talked about this yet.
Yeah, so we have different takes on this too, I think.
So you don't want the doubleheader?
I'm glad to not have the doubleheader because I think the crew on the second game is always so bad. What was your boy's name? Serginho Dip or whatever it was? Remember that?
My boy, what are you talking about?
I mean, just whoever's
yeah,
boy,
no, that guy was...
Never lived it down.
It's a tough business. This is where I have a tough time as a play-by-play guy, like, obviously I'm young.
right.
Like, I haven't done, like, I'm not saying, like, oh, look at me, I do play-by-play. Like, I would have said this in high school. Like, I make so many mistakes in a broadcast that I have trouble, like, criticizing other play-by-play guys on the air. Not because I want to, like, I don't know. Like, I have strong opinions about a lot of play-by-play guys, like, but I just know how much I mess up on a broadcast and how far I've ever been from ever having a perfect broadcast. And so I want the same
I get
grace
that.
shown to me.
I just think the problem with that is that ESPN, generally speaking, is a one NFL crew company. And on the doubleheader, they were literally putting together a second crew for a game.
Last year, it was Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's
was
true.
the second crew.
Yeah,
and then
that
Steve
was after
Levy
the
did,
year, so they kind of bailed. Yeah.
Steve Levy did Titans last year.
Yeah, Steve Levy is on the current Monday Night Football crew, right?
They had the current crew do the late game, which...
Yeah. That was Titans Broncos, wasn't it?
It was.
Oh, God. That's a hard one to stay up for.
615-737-1045, the number. No, that was... I remember that kind of being, like, insulting at the time. Like, if you're on that crew, like, you're the number one Monday Night Football crew, and the college guys are bumping you back to the West Coast Monday night game. Like, how do you feel about that if you're, like, the actual Monday night crew?
I tell you what.
But Kirk is so
There's
good,
no
though.
crew better right now, man.
I was, without question, I was actually talking with my roommate about this the other day. There's not a crew better in sports right now than Fowler and Herbstreit.
Listen,
Romo's hit or miss for me.
The way that I think of, no, I agree with you completely. Actually, my criticism of Romo, it's too much. He just talks a bit too much, I think.
Yeah.
But Chris Fowler, I think, is like as versatile of a guy as there is in sports.
Without
From
question.
tennis to horse race, like whatever, he can do it all. I feel the same way about him that a lot of people feel about Tirico. I think he can just do anything.
And I love Tirico.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely.
Tirico on radio, I actually think is better than TV.
Yeah.
He does this thing, and I try to emulate this as much as I can. And again, this is not me hyping myself up. I have a lot to learn.
This is totally how we had this hour planned.
Right, I know. It's usually the best ones. He'll like give a different descriptor at each yard line. So it's like stiff arm at the 20, buy man at the 15, spin move at the 5,
yeah, that's
end
very,
zone, touchdown.
I've never thought about that, but I could hear Tirico saying it as you just went through it.
And that I try to do it every day, and I fail at it a lot, but it's biting off a lot. But no, absolutely.
But so back to the schedule.
Yes,
Thursday night is great.
Yeah,
Bucs
it is.
Cowboys is a great way to start it. A lot of people will be happy because the Cowboys will lose, which people love to see. Everyone, hey,
Sure.
if the Cowboys are going to be in primetime, which probably 6 or 7 times this year, I'd assume, like always.
It won't be like last year where DiNucci is the quarterback.
DiNucci, yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
I forgot about that. He just got cut the other day.
Yeah, I did.
Look, I think with Dak healthy, I think the Cowboys are the NFC East champions. And I don't even know that I think it's particularly close.
I think it's Washington.
I think they're the champions.
I love Washington's
and how many
defense.
wins? How many wins can Washington's offense get you?
10 or 11.
I don't know about that. It's a hard schedule they play.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It really is.
I can
mean,
see
you get the Giants
Washington.
twice.
I think Washington's the second best team in the East at like 8-9 or 9-8.
I think the Giants are bad this year. I think the
Giants
Giants
are bad every year.
But I think the way Joe Judge has managed everything there, the money they spent on Adoree Jackson, no disrespect to him, but the availability and the talent and all things considered, it's a big number for Adoree Jackson.
I'm just not a Daniel Jones believer.
And I'm not a Joe Judge believer. I mean, making grown men run laps and do push-ups is something I will never,
like six vets quit?
Ever understand in the NFL. Ever. 615-737-1045. And I try to watch practice with Coach Mack anytime I can. And, I mean, I don't get it. Quickly, as we head to break, former Texans running back Duke Johnson is signing today with the Jacksonville Jaguars practice squad, per his agent Drew Rosenhaus. Another running back for Urban Meyer to try to use as a wide receiver. Doesn't have ETN, so.
Is he out for the season?
Yeah.
Ugh.
James Robinson, big fantasy pick.
Yeah.
Big time.
Big time.
Coming up next, though, let's get into what happened at Nissan Stadium last night. Nissan Stadium this Sunday, we previewed a lot of Titans Cardinals. But last night was big for the city of Nashville, but just how big was it? There were a lot of empty seats in Nissan Stadium yesterday, but how did Nashville do in filling the seats and meeting expectations with a big U.S. soccer match in town against Canada? Plus, we'll talk with Ben Wright of Broadway Sports Media, who will provide a little more color and context to that topic at 5:30. Coming up, final hour, it's flying by, and it's 104.5 The Zone.
After a long offseason, training camp, and 3 fake football games, the 2021 Titans regular season is here.
Pretty disappointing game from a United States soccer perspective. There's no question about that. As the U.S. men begin World Cup qualifiers this week. But, Davey, I thought it was a good crowd. I thought it was a really engaged crowd. And the specifics of what I mean by that is I had seats in the lower bowl, a nice humble brag by me, and I did not sit down once. I did a couple times, but it was for about 30, 45 seconds of an injury timeout. A couple different times, then at halftime. It was like being in the student section at a Tennessee game again. You stand the entire game if you're in the lower bowl. This is how the first Nashville SC game was, by the way, too, against Atlanta United now about a year and a half ago when Nashville played its first ever MLS match. It obviously isn't as big or as loud as a Titans crowd in a big game. It was more engaged to every kick of the ball and every bit of the minutia of a game than a Titans crowd is, though. Fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, numbers-wise, I probably expected the crowd to be a little bit better on its face. I would have liked to see it over 50. But I was pretty happy with the number 43. I didn't think that was horrible. Labor Day weekend, a lot of people have other plans outside of just sports. You know what I mean? A lot of people are at the beach every Labor Day. There's a million things you can name. That being said, I thought 43 was okay. I would have liked to see it be better. But the crowd that was there I thought was good. I've already touched on my issues with the hosting issues earlier. But crowd was into it. Unfortunately, the team was not very into it.
No, they weren't. And Davey, when you look at a crowd of 43,000 people in Nissan Stadium, it's hard in some ways to compare that crowd to past crowds watching other U.S. teams and World Cup qualifiers because a lot of these games are played in soccer stadiums and not football stadiums. But in 2016, let's go back to November 11th versus Mexico and Columbus, 24,650. USA, Trinidad and Tobago, 5 years ago today, 2016, September the 6th. USA played Trinidad and Tobago in a World Cup qualifier in Jacksonville. 19,000 people were there. 19,000. So when you look at an entire empty one side of Nissan Stadium last night, and you have people chiming in that aren't normally soccer people. I know Buck Rising and I had a conversation yesterday on Twitter because he's tuning in for a game that he wouldn't normally tune into because it becomes a part of the Nashville sports conversation when it happens in Nashville. I think the context of how many people normally go to these games across the country is very important because 43,000 doesn't sound great when you think about the crowd that was in Nissan Stadium last night. To me, Davey, it met my expectations. I expected 35 to 40. It was a little bit better. I think what really exceeded my expectations was how into the game that 43,000 was. That's what I think was better than what I expected.
I think that's fair. Look, I think the USSF has done some dumb stuff with how they've decided to price people out. They just had their annual meeting a few weeks ago, and they kind of gave the report that, look, attendance has gone down every cycle, but revenue has gone up, and they're kind of fine with how that stands. I think that is stupid. I think there's a very easy way to get people in at a cheaper price point, to get more people liking the game, because 0 or 1-1 draws at home aren't very likable. So
right.
I think the more kids you can get in there, stuff like that see Christian Pulisic or whoever those guys might be, is important. Apparently the people running the game disagree with that. So that's unfortunate.
It is. 615-737-1045 is the number if you were also at Nissan Stadium last night. Look, this is also a kind of event and a kind of atmosphere that's going to get people on board. This is kind of an onboarding process for, hey, let's go check out what this thing is about. And from that perspective, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was a good first taste of what, going to a soccer game is like for a lot of these people. And look, we're not going to break down a lot of the performance itself by the United States because at 5:30 on this radio station, it's just not in our best interest to do that. We have a soccer show that we host every Tuesday night at 9 on 104.5 The Zone right here and at 10 on podcast in the Nashville Soccer Show. But I'd like to think, Davey, that anyone on this station today, if they were here, not on a holiday, would still be at least having this part of the discussion of how does Nashville do big events? how well did Nashville check the box of doing this big event with a bigger soccer game than what's ever been here in the city of Nashville?
Yeah. Look, I would have liked to see him do better, to be honest with you. I think the game was what it was. You can't, Butch Spearden doesn't control Christian Pulisic's performance on the field. So that's a different set of circumstances. But, I would have liked to see the team kind of come in, Nissan kind of come in and say, hey, look, like, we're trying to make a push for a World Cup game. Let's get some cheaper people in. Hey, you know what? We saw for that first Nashville SC game where there was 50-some thousand people, we saw corporations do very large ticket buys for that.
Mm-hmm.
Would have liked to see something like that happen to get people who normally aren't going to get into the game in the door. You see attendance get better. I think the party before game was great. The vibe downtown was awesome.
It really was.
Everybody in red, white, and blue
Really
hanging
was.
out. It was a lot of fun. So I'll credit them for that. I don't see what FIFA wouldn't have liked. You know what I mean? I think you got to lay for the land. You saw the pedestrian bridge in action, in and out. Good crowd that was there to have fun. I think the idea that it's being construed as the fans booing the home team at the end was very dumb. They're booing the ref, booing the other team. So I don't really it's like you never left a game before where everybody's kind of just like, ugh.
Right.
Like it happens like all the time.
Right.
So
happens at halftime. It happened halftime in Neyland Stadium on Thursday.
So I thought that was dumb, but no, I think they did pretty good. I think it could have been better, but I think it's pretty good.
Joining us now to join the conversation, Ben Wright, our good friend. You can find him on Twitter at Ben Wright of Broadway Sports Media. Does a great job covering Nashville SC and the U.S. men's national team wherever they are, whether that's in Nashville or elsewhere. Ben, good to talk to you, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Davey, congrats on the hosting gig. You're getting famous on us, I guess.
Appreciate it, buddy.
I love it. Ben, from your perspective, watching this U.S. team last night and watching the atmosphere and kind of the big event that Nashville put on, especially compared to what they did for the Grand Prix a couple weeks ago, it's two really big events for Nashville on a world stage in a couple of weeks. What was your overall takeaway of what the atmosphere was like, what the fan support was like? Did it meet your expectations or what?
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, I think ticket prices, like we've talked about, have kind of hampered things. So I think it probably in some sense it's a missed opportunity from U.S. soccer, just because I think they probably could have sold another 10, 15,000. But, I mean, from my perspective in the press box, obviously the Nissan Stadium press box windows don't open, so you don't really get the full effect of just the volume. But it sounded like the best crowd I've heard at a soccer game at Nissan since the home opener for Nashville last year. Huge crowd. I thought the atmosphere was good from the kickoff. I mean, I don't have the booing. I don't have a problem with. I thought the U.S. deserved it. So I mean, I think everything that they could control, I think it went as well as they could have expected.
Ben, quote here from Christian Pulisic post game. Need new ideas at times. We didn't test them enough. We couldn't break them down. Obviously, it wasn't good enough. I think that really sums up how I felt about the match, sitting in the stands after a few beers. Looking from the box, what did you see? You're a little bit higher than we were. Obviously, you can see the game develop in a different way. But, look, I just didn't see, the midfield seemed disconnected at times. Obviously, the fullback struggled a bit. DeAndre Yedlin in particular, and Serginho Dest had a bit of issue before he got hurt too. But what did you see as the main issue last night? And obviously that's a good Canada side, so let's give them credit as well.
I mean, if you're going to talk about fullbacks, I thought Anthony Robinson really grew into the game. And I thought he ended up as one of the better performers on the night. But yeah, I agree about midfield. It just felt like they were so concerned with Canada on the counterattack that they almost were they just didn't want to make any mistakes, and so they just played so conservatively to avoid giving the ball over. I thought Acosta and Leggett especially, there were a couple times where they just needed to pull the trigger and take a chance on a more aggressive pass into the box, and I felt like instead they would turn around, play it backwards, play it side to side, take the safe option, and so the U.S. had 72% possession, and it never really felt like they were threatening. I think Weston McKennie's absence really hurt them because he's a guy that you can kind of count on to take more risks in possession. And without him, they seem to just really not have any ideas other than just try to circulate it around the back, get it wide, and hit a crossing.
On with Ben Wright of Broadway Sports Media here on 104.5 The Zone. Ben, for the people that are not soccer people and who are going to tune in when they hear World Cup in the United States because it's the most appealing part of a sport that maybe doesn't appeal to them a whole lot, what's a realistic expectation and how big is the concern level right now for this United States team after 2 games?
I mean, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button, but I don't think you're too far away from that either. I think a bad result on Wednesday in Honduras, and it might be time to start asking some pretty serious questions. I think the only kind of saving grace is the new format. In previous cycles, they would have had 10 games. Now they have 14. So there's a little bit more wiggle room and kind of some more chances on the back end of things to make up ground. But, I mean, the draw in El Salvador, I don't think it was a great performance, but you'll take a point on the road. I think as good as Canada is, there's just not really an excuse for not winning at home. And I think if things play out poorly on Wednesday night, especially with all the injuries they have, I think you could be looking back at this first window as a real missed opportunity.
Ben, looking at the last 3 home World Cup qualifiers for the United States, going back to all the way to 2016 with this as well. Columbus, 24,000. Jacksonville, 19,410. And now U.S. men's national team at home, 43,028. Given the context of the numbers that the United States has had in other cities and other buildings, I know it's hard to compare when you've got some smaller soccer-specific stadiums versus these bigger NFL stadiums that aren't going to be full. How would you grade kind of 43,000? I know we talked a little bit about the atmosphere itself and the noise and people kind of being involved in the game, but was that more than what you maybe expected was going to be in Nissan Stadium last night?
I mean, I had heard that the goal was right around 40,000.
Okay.
That was Butch Spearden said that he kind of 40,000 was their mark to not be embarrassed. So I think that was kind of the expectation. And I think just context is important too. I mean, if you go back to their previous World Cup qualifiers, I mean, you have to remember where the program was then versus where it is now. I mean, that was maybe the lowest point of interest in the national team after missing the World Cup, after the really long coaching search to get Berhalter on board. It just felt like the program was in a completely different place, and now you have them coming off of 2 wins against Mexico in finals of tournaments this summer, and it feels like going into this match, I mean, this is close to an all-time high as far as interest and optimism in the program, and so I think you should be expecting pretty significant crowds, even with maybe some of the ticket pricing issues. But I mean, people are interested and excited about this U.S. team again, and they weren't 2 years ago, so I think that probably had a pretty big impact as well.
Ben, you mentioned what would be a bad result against Honduras. If I'm looking at it on this, I think cool heads could have come in and said 2 draws and a win is a pretty decent performance from these first 3 games. Mm-hmm. I personally would have said 2 wins and a draw. That would have been me. I thought El Salvador and Canada were both very winnable. If you go and win at Honduras, really no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah. But,
not that that's easy to do, but I'm
saying. No,
saying,
I think
right.
Honduras is a much better team than El Salvador. That's
right.
The problem. I think you could live with 5 points from this game, and before this window, I would have said, okay, you win against El Salvador. A draw against Honduras on the road is a very solid point, and then given how good Canada is, I mean, it's not a great result, but you can live with a draw at home against Canada. Now you're kind of it's not a must-win, but I think it's a must-not-lose against Honduras, which is a really tricky proposition. I mean, that's a difficult place to play. Over the past 2 or 3 cycles, they've been on the cusp of kind of that top 4 group in CONCACAF. They've qualified for World Cups recently. I mean, it's going to be I think Canada's a better side, but I think just the atmosphere and environment in Honduras might make it an even tougher match than we saw last night.
Ben Wright has been our guest from Broadway Sports Media. If you are trying to get into Nashville SC, if you're trying to get into the United States, no, we didn't spend any time on NSC here. Ben is your guy. Follow him on Twitter at Ben Wright, and we'll be sure anytime we are on to get you involved, Ben, as we continue the United States journey, where the vast majority of people that are going to tune in for soccer are tuning in for games like this. So we will certainly continue this anytime we can. Ben, appreciate the time. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, boys. This is always fun.
See you, buddy.
All right. When we come back, we will close out the show. One aspect of the first 2 weeks of the Titans schedule, I think, gives this Titans defense a little bit of an advantage, leading you right in to tonight's Mike Vrabel show here on 104.5 The Zone. Coming up next on 104.5 The Zone.
Buck Rising will always give you the best on the Titans and admittedly may stir it up a little along the way.
The more you stir it, the more it stinks. Ew, what? Well, I mean, that's kind of my job, isn't it? I'm supposed to stir. Now, fortunately, I smell good, so we're not going to worry about that.
The Buck Rising Show, tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on 104.5 The Zone.
Go up to Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram. That's where you need to go to get that next new vehicle. Maybe you're thinking about a new car. Maybe you're thinking about
Rhett Bryan Rice, to Kevin Dyson, to Ben Wright, for joining us on the show today. It's been fun, Davey.
Ton of fun, man.
It's great to get you talking about things that aren't soccer as well.
Yeah, I like
if we just talk soccer.
Yeah.
But Davey has a bigger skill set than just soccer, so why box him in?
Some would argue I have no skill set. So.
They're down. Talking a lot of Titans today, and of course the Mike Vrabel Show presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans on Titans Radio is coming up next. And a reminder, you can get in questions for the coach at Titans Radio on Twitter. Coming up next. I know they've got some questions so far, but still time to get those in as well. Titans Cardinals Sunday. We were talking about this off air. The Titans are going to get the same kind of quarterback week 1 and week 2. That is a great thing for this team. I don't think it's great that they get DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, Rondale Moore, and Christian Kirk in week 1, because a lot of the question marks we have about this Titans team, you're going to learn pretty quickly in week 1 on Sunday. But getting the same kind of quarterback that can improvise, that can extend the play, that's moving around a lot in the pocket, I think is a plus when you go from Kyler Murray to Russell Wilson in week 2.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Or if you're just not good at stopping it, maybe it's a bad thing.
Maybe it's bad.
I mean,
right?
you could go either way with it.
At least you get time to tinker on it if you can't stop it.
Right.
I think the difference I think you have a better chance of stopping it in week 2 because I think the line is so much worse in Seattle than it is Arizona. So I think if the Titans can go out, perform decently well on defense against this side and get a win, I feel much more confident in the team heading to Seattle than I do sitting here right now. So,
yeah.
It's that's like hedging a bet in some ways, saying, hey, let's see how they do week 1 and know how they'll do week 2. Seattle's a terrible place to play for anyone all of the time.
It's tough.
It's always hard and I say this, there's a lot to be written about the East Coast teams playing in a West Coast time zone. But Nashville's about as close to the East Coast as you can get time zone wise. So it's basically the same thing. So I hate that part of it. But I think Arizona, on its face, probably a better team than Seattle, especially right here at the start of the season. Now we'll see what happens over the course of 17 games. But, you would feel confident going to Seattle with a better performance than a worse.
Things we did not get to today. Houston Texans officially named veteran Tyrod Taylor starting quarterback. I don't even think that's news. That's why I didn't even put it in our show today.
Yeah.
Like, who do we think was going to be the starter? Davis Mills?
Tyrod's a guy who I feel pretty bad for in a lot of ways in his career. He gets sick. He gets sick in Baltimore and loses the starting job to Joe Flacco. And then he has a team doctor puncture his lung in San Diego and loses the starting job to Justin Herbert.
It's bad that I'm laughing at that because it's obviously not funny that it happened. But
my God,
it's just like, how does that happen?
Also, Hokey great T-Mobile. I love the guy. So
it's crazy that's it's great.
That dude was great in college.
Oh, he was. Absolutely was. Someone who's not great in college football, that is no longer a part of college football, UConn head coach Randy Edsall to step down immediately at season's end. That's coming off a loss to Holy Cross.
You saw the tweet with like the fist in
I
the
was
air?
just about to say.
Oh, my God.
So there was a tweet going around. Look this up, and it's I think Ramon Foster retweeted it.
Yeah.
And it said, gosh, UConn is checking out in week 2. And it's like their defensive coordinator giving this impassioned speech, like trying to get their guys ready. Like, all right, we're going to go out there. We're gonna blitz them here. It's like they're not going to gain another yard. All right, everybody, hands in. And nobody puts their hands in. Like, we can't play the audio of it because there really isn't audio. Like, it's just like a muted of the TV. You can't hear what he's actually saying.
God.
But just imagine like you're like a high school football player or a college football player. And it's like, all right, buddy, hands in, hands in, hands in. It's like even the kids that aren't good at the sport can get, on board for that. And it's just like all of them just didn't hear him. It was so bad. I mean, there are a lot of bad Power 5 college football teams this year.
Yeah.
Duke, not great. Lost to Charlotte. That's Charlotte's first ever Power 5 win. How about Washington? We haven't talked about this yet either.
The big ones for me were Washington and Indiana. Washington and Indiana both are – I mean, Indiana probably had as much hype as Washington did, playing in a better conference against a team who I think a lot of people were saying, hey, they should finish ahead. So I could see kind of, they're in conference, that's a worse loss. But when you look at what Washington did against Montana, I mean, that is a bad loss.
It was the end of his second stint for Edsel at UConn. Went 6-32 through 3 seasons plus 2 games. 6-32. How many coaches that coach different sports? I'm serious. If you gave like Gino Auriemma UConn football, that's actually wow. I didn't even think about it just being at the same school. I just was thinking of other elite coaches. If you give Gino Auriemma a staff of assistant football coaches, surely he could do better than 6-32 in 3+ seasons. Like, I'm of the opinion there are coaches out there that are just good leaders. Like Pat Summitt could have coached a lot more than just women's basketball.
Absolutely.
That's always the example in Tennessee because it's true, first of all.
Yeah, it's very true.
I think there are coaches that are like elite basketball coaches that could do better than that. Am I a bad person for saying that?
I mean,
I don't think there's a lot of UConn football fans listening to us right now. Oh, man. Fun show today.
Ton of fun, man.
Flew by. Always good to talk with you, Davey. We'll be back at it tomorrow night. I said that like we were going to be in this time slot again tomorrow. I said, like, all right, back at it tomorrow, 3 to 6. 3HL's like, excuse me? Brent Doherty immediately texts me like, you are? You are? Actually, tomorrow, go out and see 3HL Buffalo Wild Wings. Darrington Evans, the live Titans player guest. Buffalo Wild Wings kicking off the season tomorrow. Going to be fun. But there's still lots more to come. Coming up next, the Mike Vrabel Show, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans on Titans Radio and 104.5 The Zone. That's next, right here. Fun show today. Thanks for joining us from 2 to 6. Check out the podcast wherever you find them. We'll talk to you next time. Mike Vrabel Show coming up next on 104.5 The Zone.
Live interaction with other listeners while watching your favorite Zone shows. It's 104.5 The Zone TV live on YouTube and Twitch.